Warning: the author has tagged this story with the following explicit tags: sex and profanity. Listener discretion is advised. Hello everyone, welcome to Rainbow Infinity. Today I'll be reading Drake Redwing's Too Afraid to Ask. If you like the reading, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Please enjoy. An invitation. Tempest Shadow stared awkwardly at the table in front of her, contemplating the tea set that sat within the crosshairs of her aquamarine eyes. The tea set was made of polished black marble, with flecks of gold mixed into the stone. If Tempest was in this situation only a year or so ago, she would have taken delight in smashing this set to bits, just to see the look of defeat and despair in another pony's eyes as she interrogated them. To restore her horn, to be whole again, of course, she wouldn't have hesitated to do more. But, in the present, after her quest concluded, that was no longer considered proper. Tempest listened silently as Rarity, one of the few ponies she could speak freely in front of, prattled on about who was wearing what that weekend, or what was wearing who, or some such. That sort of conversation would be more stimulating if Tempest knew even the littlest bit about fashion. She hadn't had much time for experience in that sphere of interest when working tirelessly for an evil warlord. The only sewing-related skill she had was the ability to mend wounds on the battlefield, though, needless to say, it lacked the certain finesse of Rarity's craft. Even Grubber, who had an uncanny knowledge about baked goods that rivaled that of Pinkie Pie, would have trouble coming up with the mental image of a sewing needle or a spool of thread, without being distracted by the thought of a cake shaped like a sewing machine. Rarity?" Tempest asked, making sure it was just loud enough for her to hear. Rarity stopped her rambling about what color best complemented a pony's fetlocks and looked over to Fizz. "Yes, Tempest? What is it?" I have something to ask you about," Tempest mumbled, awkwardly staring at her own hooves, as if she were ashamed of the question. "Oh, well, that's fine, darling," Rarity replied, taking a sip of her tea. "Go ahead, ask me anything." Tempest took a deep breath, blushing and wiggling uncomfortably in her seat, before slowly saying, "I want to ask Twilight on a date." Rarity nearly choked on her tea, but, fortunately, she managed to swallow the hot beverage instead of spraying it all over the purple mare sitting across from her. What? "Did I stutter?" Tempest asked, a little bit irritated at Rarity's reaction. Rarity could tell that her reaction must have been offensive to her friend, for she quickly apologized. "Oh dear, I'm sorry, Tempest. I wasn't trying to be rude. I simply—" She stammered for a second. "Well, if I'm being totally honest, it comes as a real shock. No, not that I don't think that you two have chemistry or anything. It's just that, well—" "You're shocked that I'm into her," Tempest finished, looking crestfallen. "I suppose that's unsurprising, given that she's her and I'm me." Rarity adopted an embarrassed expression, before admitting, "Yes, darling." Tempest sighed deeply through her nose, speaking from the one place she still had difficulty connecting with. Even after her time serving the Storm King was a mere memory, her heart was never simple. "It's just—" she started. "I don't know how to describe it, but it's like I get lightheaded around Twilight. I can't take my eyes off of her. Everything about her, her eyes, her mane, her smile." Tempest stared into space momentarily, then resumed in a more passionate tone. "Her soft feathery wings, her cute little nose, her cuddly body, her voice. Oh my gosh, her beautiful voice!" She shuddered. "It's like she's a ray of sunshine who will love you no matter what you do, or how you think, or what villain you served. I think about her and I feel warm inside. I see her and my heartbeat gets faster. I hear her voice as she sings, and I go weak-kneed and slightly panicky. I see her flying, and my heart soars, and my face turns red, and my breath hitches in my chest. It took me a while to realize there wasn't something chronically wrong with me. Dr. Blossom has already screened me mentally. Twice. And Dr. Greymare confirmed I was in peak physical condition. Blossom told me, once I had been screened, and I told her about Twilight being the cause of my afflictions, that what I was feeling was love. A love that I don't know how to express. I felt this way for 3 months now, and I want to act on it. I want to tell Twilight how I feel." Rarity flushed a little at Tempest's verbose descriptions of how deep her affection was for their mutual friend, fanning herself with one hoof. Meanwhile, Tempest blushed a bit deeper, before continuing. This might seem a little weird, but sometimes I dream about her. I dream that she and I are, off somewhere alone and kissing super deeply. And, and maybe a little more than just kissing. And those are the best dreams I've ever had, Rarity. Sometimes when I'm home alone with my thoughts, I just have to drop what I'm doing and take a cold shower. Rarity's eyes widened and she quickly shouted out, "Oh my goodness!" It appeared her guest took the hint, as Tempest stopped mid-sentence and chuckled sheepishly. I know all of that probably sounds really stupid, doesn't it? Tempest fiddled with her cup of tea. A mare like me, fantasizing like a school filly about a pony like that and confessing all of this stuff, including the... She quickly chased the embarrassed confession with a sip of her tea. No, on the contrary, darling, Rarity said quickly, assuaging Tempest's fears. Your desire for Twilight is a bit fiery, but there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm very happy you feel it. Reminds me of one of my old romance novels. She reminisced about the first few dates of her relationship with a certain orange farm mare, recalling just how intense some of their first kisses were. So, am I wrong for feeling this way? Tempest asked. Should I not have been so forward in explaining how I feel? And am I wrong for thinking of asking her out? Of course not, Rarity answered cheerily. You're simply experiencing a little condition which the rest of the world calls limerence, or a hard crush. Continuing on despite Tempest's bashful smile, she explained, It's far from wrong to express the depth of your passion, Tempest. Don't you worry. And if you need advice for planning a potential date, you know my door is always open to you. I need that advice yesterday, Tempest nervously blurted out, a sudden avalanche of words practically burying Rarity as she lurched forward. I've never been on a date in my life. I've never even felt this way about any pony before, and I want to really make sure that it works out well, and that she and I maybe have some sort of relationship beyond just being friends, and maybe spend a night or two together and... Tempest, deep breaths, darling, Rarity insisted, attempting to stop Tempest from devolving into a ball of nerves and embarrassment. It worked. Tempest closed her mouth and sat back in her seat, closing her eyes and breathing slowly and deeply through her nose. Dr. Blossom's recommended technique. Gently, she told herself. In and out. In and out. Her breathing followed the pattern to the letter. The tension across her body washed away like the retreating surf on a beach. Feel better? A few seconds later, opening her eyes, Tempest replied, Yes. That's better. Rarity took another swig of her tea. Apologies for getting so loud, darling, but you are acting so restive I couldn't give you my solid advice. You act as if you're preparing for the incoming Fashion Week apocalypse. Tempest blinked. I don't prepare for that sort of thing, Rarity. Oh, apologies again. I suppose not every pony prepares for the yearly horse-warming crush like I do for an entire month. Anyway, the first step to planning a potential date is deciding a location. What sort of mood do you desire? A restaurant? A trip to the theater? Perhaps a long nature walk? Tempest considered, before admitting, A restaurant sounds good. I don't do the theater. I had a bad experience at one when I was a little filly. Seriously, don't ask unless you want funnel cake to be ruined for you forever. Rarity beamed. Excellent. What sort of ambience? She took another swig of her tea. Ambience? Tempest considered. I don't know, probably just the Hayburger or something. Rarity finally did spit her tea out in shock, and immediately inwardly cursed herself for doing so. The Hayburger! She screamed dramatically, a look of utter bewilderment in her eyes. Tempest, though she was accustomed to Rarity occasionally freaking out for minor reasons, was still startled by her outburst, and nearly fell off of her chair. Rarity, what the... No, Rarity shouted, her eyes full of fire. You cannot invite Twilight to a place like the Hayburger for a first date. It's hardly romantic. The waiter makes flatulence jokes loudly for the whole restaurant to hear. I went there with AJ once on a date, and I have never felt so humiliated. I got dressed up and everything. Why would you even think of inviting Twilight to the Hayburger, Tempest Shadow? Tempest, uncharacteristically shivering a little from the volume of Rarity's outburst, softly replied, Because I like Hayburgers, and last I checked Twilight does too. Rarity sat back down on her chair forcefully, her eyes still burning from irritation at Tempest's lack of good restaurant taste. All right, Tempest darling, she resolved. I see I need more of a hooves-on approach to this advice. While a place like the Hayburger is very convenient if you're short of time, or if you're hung over after a night of drinking at a bar, it isn't exactly the type of establishment to set the mood on a date. Tempest attempted to defend herself, saying, Well, I thought it'd be someplace that Twilight would enjoy going to. We've been there before for lunch. Rarity, her patience wearing thin, quickly cut in. Let me put it this way, Tempest. Do you think that Twilight, your friend who you have an overwhelming crush on, is going to get the message of how you feel about her when you invite her out to some place as pedestrian, blasé, and milquetoast as the Hayburger? Tempest wanted to continue to defend herself, but she found it hard to argue with her logic. You've got a point, she admitted after a few seconds. Exactly! Rarity emphasized this declaration with a flourish of her hoof. Now, sit down and think. You already have decided on a restaurant as your potential first date. Is there somewhere in town you can think of that is even mildly classy? Tempest weighed her options. She wasn't comfortable at all going to some fine dining restaurant for several reasons. The food was way too fancy for her comfort. The stress of maintaining an appearance of elegance and culture, even in the face of an itch on one's hind leg, or a need to visit the restroom, wasn't worth it to her. The cost of a table was prohibitively expensive, and she knew Twilight wasn't a soufflé flambé type of pony. She also didn't want to go somewhere crowded. Too many ponies would drown out their attempts at conversation. And unfortunately, Ponyville, though it was somewhat small, did have a lot of crowded restaurants. During her year or so of living in Ponyville, Tempest had noticed several smaller, more remote places to eat, where she and Twilight might have a bit of privacy. There's that one cafe that I've walked past a few times, she intoned. The one over on Wither Street with the trellises. Rarity let out a gasp of delight upon hearing the joint's description. You mean the Sunflower Grill? Tempest nodded shyly. Yep, that's the one. Sweet Celestia, darling, that's perfect! Rarity shouted, quickly jumping up from her seat and rushing out of the kitchen and into the boutique proper, retrieving swaths of fabric and other sewing supplies before rushing over to her sewing machine. Tempest, meanwhile, stood up from the kitchen table and began to follow her fellow unicorn out into the shop. Rarity? Tempest asked, noticing her bizarre behavior. What are you doing? What does it look like, darling? Rarity asked amidst her furious burst of creativity. I'm making you an evening dress. Tempest's eyes widened. Rarity, she stammered. I haven't even asked Twilight out yet. Why are you making me a dress? Rarity mulled it over before answering. If what I know about Twilight is any indication, she will be jumping at the chance to go on a date with a sizzler of a mare like yourself. Tempest's blush intensified, and she felt her heart beat faster, though she wasn't sure if it was due to the idea of Twilight being enthusiastic to go on a date, or from Rarity's compliment. You think so? Filly, please, Rarity dismissed with a wave of her hoof. If Twilight's history of love interests has been any indication, she's very into the strong, muscular, could break me from how things go in bed type. Tempest cringed a little at this, but Rarity only continued. One of her first crushes was Flash Sentry. I remember her going on and on about his muscles and physique. And then there was her interest in Sunset Shimmer. Shame that it didn't work out in the end. She cast a smug look over her shoulder and said, But you, darling, with your bewildering lithe, sexy figure, and your gorgeous aquamarine eyes, and that mysterious scar in your cute little horn, you are exactly the type of mare that Twilight would be head over horseshoes for. Tempest bashfully shuffled her hooves and smiled slightly. You really think so? I know so, Rarity replied. And, well, even if Twilight isn't interested in dating you, at the very least you will have an excellent dress all for yourself, free of charge. I honestly prefer suits, Tempest tried to say, but Rarity wasn't listening. She suddenly stopped and stared into space for a moment. Hold on a tick, she questioned softly. What exactly was I doing before you mentioned going to the Sunflower Grill? Tempest expressed mild annoyance. You were supposed to be giving me dating advice, and also what I should say when I asked Twilight out. Oh, yes, Rarity exclaimed, face-huffing as if she had forgotten something as simple as what day it was. Well, darling, she began, turning around in her chair before the sewing machine. I suppose I can give you a few tips, 3 to be exact, I've learned quite a few in my day, for both stallions and mares alike." "Fire away," Tempest encouraged, sitting down across from her friend. "Firstly," Rarity began, as if teaching a lecture, "confidence. Stand straight when presenting yourself. Suavity. Don't sound too casual, or she might not take the hint." Tempest nodded as she mentally jotted the first item down. "I'm mostly confident, but not with things like this. How do I gain that confidence?" Rarity smiled. "Good thing you asked, since that's the second thing. A good self-image." Tempest was puzzled. "What do you mean?" Upon hearing this, Rarity face-hoofed again, this time from exasperation at Tempest's complete and utter lack of knowledge about something as simple as a date. "It's like having the talk with Sweetie all over again," she thought to herself, frustrated. "Okay, close your eyes, Tempest." Tempest was puzzled. "Close my—" "Do it," Rarity quickly cut in, an insistent look on her muzzle. "All right." "Now, darling, breathe," Rarity instructed. "Breathe slowly." Tempest easily engaged in the same breathing exercise she had done earlier. "Now, Tempest, what do you see yourself as?" Rarity asked softly, a hint of anticipation in her voice. Tempest thought for a few seconds before answering. "I see a broken mare, ugly, a monster, a cripple, who naively fell for the tricks of the Storm King, who attacked the princesses in my homeland, who hurt ponies, an outcast who does not deserve this life, doesn't deserve pity or love or kindness or twilight." Rarity was taken aback. She placed one hoof over her chest and stifled a sympathetic gasp. "Good heavens, darling," she breathed, aghast. I had no idea you felt that way about yourself. Are you okay? I can always fetch Dr. Blossom if you need her help." Tempest smiled weakly. "I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm fine, really." As she spoke the last bit, though, it sounded as though she was choking back tears. "I'm fine." "All right, Tempest. I can see I have a lot to work with here," Rarity replied. "Listen only to the sound of my voice. For right this second, tell those voices to get lost. They are not as important as they make themselves out to be." Tempest slowly nodded, and did as Rarity instructed. Once she had banished the darker thoughts to the furthest recesses of her mind, she announced, "Done." "Very good, darling," Rarity replied. "Now, focus on the sound of my voice. Tempest Shadow, Fizzle-Pop Berry Twist, you are not a broken mare. You are not a monster, nor a cripple, nor an outcast. You may have fallen prey to the Storm King's deceptions, but he also underestimated you, which led to his undoing. You saved the princesses. You are not a pariah, darling. You are loved by friends all around you who do not harbor resentment. And, most importantly, you are far from ugly, so distant from ugliness that most mares your age, half of your age even, would jump through hoops to be you. You're ravishing, darling. You're lithe, statuesque, muscular. Your muzzle is long and elegant. Your eyes are a dazzling aquamarine. Your broken horn does not make you ugly at all. It's a part of you now. Your mane is so silky and smooth. And deep down, most of all, you deserve love and kindness and friendship far more than some other ponies. In short, Tempest, you're hot." Tempest's heart was fluttering again, her blush returning with a vengeance as she absorbed Rarity's flurry of compliments. Was she really speaking truthfully? "Hear my words and rejoice, Tempest," Rarity continued. "Be confident, be bold, be alluring, be comfortable in your own skin. You are glorious, and you can and will ask Twilight out. The only thing you have to fear is fear itself." Tempest nodded as she listened to her friend's words. She must be speaking the truth, she thought, because why else would I be feeling this way? She'd be lying if she said her confidence wasn't lifted by Rarity's compliments and affirmations. What had started as a mere flicker in her soul had grown into a glowing, bright flame. She felt the tension and jitters across her whole body slowly fade away with every inhalation and exhalation, like the tide advancing and retreating on a beach. She even felt happy. "Thank you, Rarity," she whispered. I feel better. A lot better. I feel like I can do it now. I feel like I can just walk up to Twilight and ask her out." "Excellent, darling, excellent," Rarity said with a soft and mischievous giggle. Tempest heard her leave the sewing machine and move around the boutique a bit. The odd behavior puzzled her. "You said there were 3 tips you could give me," she called over her shoulder. "What's the third?" "Ah, yes, the third and most important tip of all," Rarity concluded, returning to where she had initially been with a brisk clip-clop of her hooves. "A fetching appearance is always, always essential. Now, how do you feel about a mud mask before I go to work on your eyes?" Tempest's eyes shot open as she saw Rarity standing before her with a cosmetics kit levitating in her magic, and with a sly smile on her face. It was obvious. A makeover was imminent. The broken-horned unicorn face-huffed and cursed quietly. "Oh, buck me." Applejack bucked her hooves against an apple tree in the orchard, causing several fruits to land in the baskets surrounding its trunk. Several more landed on the head of the mauve alicorn, who was busy following her, causing her to yelp in surprise and mild pain. "Twilight," she said with a mildly annoyed expression, "if I've told you once, I've told you 1,000 times. Don't stand right under the tree when I'm apple bucking." Twilight Sparkle rubbed her head in an attempt to soothe the pain. "Sorry, Applejack, but, well, I wouldn't normally follow you around this, but I need advice." Applejack halted and stared at her friend with a look of concern. She sat next to Twilight beneath the tree. "Oh, all right, Sugar Cube. Is everything okay?" "Well," Twilight replied with a bashful glance down at the ground, absent-mindedly tracing a circle in the grass with her hoof. "Yes and no. There's no real danger. For the first time in what feels like forever, there isn't a villain threatening Equestria. But something isn't okay with me." "What is it?" Applejack asked, still a little concerned. Twilight stammered for a few seconds, brushing her hooves through her mane. "You see, I'm kinda, I've gotta, she's gotta, I'm kind of in." Upon Applejack's eyebrow raising, Twilight bolstered her courage and blurted it out, running all of her words together. "I think I'm in love with Tempest Shadow and I want to ask her on a date." Applejack blinked. Come again? A mite slower?" "I think I'm in love with Tempest and I want to ask her on a date," Twilight came again, this time a mite slower. She blushed and grinned sheepishly as she managed to say what was really on her mind. Applejack's eyes widened, and a broad smile crossed her muzzle. "Well, shoot," she chuckled. "I always kinda wondered if you were into mares, given how you were so gol-darn infatuated with Sunset last time she came through here." "Was it that obvious?" Twilight asked, rubbing the back of her neck with one hoof. "Twi, you were drooling as you saw her walk by you on the way to the restroom at the Hay Burger," Applejack replied with a snicker. "It was kinda hard not to notice." Twilight had forgotten about that incident. She laughed awkwardly and attempted to suppress the memory of Sunset, which had suddenly arisen in her mind. "Yeah, well, I've been having those same sort of feelings for Tempest lately. I mean, can you blame me? She's hot." Applejack shook her head. "Couldn't blame you even if I tried. Rarity and I are in agreement that Tempest is hotter than a tin roof under the summer sun. You said you want to ask her on a date?" Twilight nodded. "I messed up big time with Flash, and Sunset and I never were close enough. They were both attractive ponies, but the way I feel about Tempest is different. It's on a whole other level. What I had with Flash and Sunset was about as heated as a mild jalapeno pepper, and what I have for Tempest is like a double shot of Pinky's hot sauce." Applejack's eyes shot open. "Hot sauce level, huh?" "Yes!" Twilight squealed, giddily smiling and squeezing herself with glee with her wings. She reared and bounced around on her hind legs a little. "Oh, Applejack, everything about her is so incredible. I catch a glance from her soul-shaking aquamarine eyes, and my heart aches. I hear her say my name in her husky, beautiful voice, and I get butterflies in my stomach. I see her muscles flex when she walks next to me, and my knees go weak. I feel her soft, velvety fur whenever I give her a hug, and my mind is flooded with thoughts of how much I want to hold her, and be close to her, and tell her how much I love her." Twilight flopped onto her back, her wings splayed out and moving back and forth across the grass, as though she were making a snow alicorn. Applejack leaned a little bit forward, Hooey mama, Twi. I reckon you're pretty serious about this. One question, though. What exactly do you need my help for? I mean, if you just want to gush about Tempest, I got no problem with that, but you said you were both yes and no when I asked if you were okay. I'm guessing it has to do with you wanting to ask her out on a date? Twilight looked up from where she was lying on her back, her expression morphing to a more solemn one. It does. AJ, I've never asked any pony out on a date before, let alone the walking god of beauty that is Tempest Shadow. How can I do it, and not make myself look like an idiot? Applejack shrugged. It ain't that hard, Twi. You just gotta have confidence, and not be afraid to be direct here and there. When I first asked Rarity out, I thought to myself, hey, I feel a certain way about her, and I want to take her to a place I know she'll like, so I just need to ask her. You'll never get anywhere if you don't take the first step. Twilight raised herself to a sitting position, her wings folding against her torso. And how do you suggest I take that first step, AJ? Well, like I said, confidence is something you've got to have if you're going to ask any pony out. Just tell her how you feel. Twilight grimaced and shifted her weight a little. Well, it's complicated. How so? Applejack asked, raising an eyebrow. You've heard me gush about her, AJ. It's going to be awkward if I say everything, Twilight responded sadly. You know how awkward it was when Pinky and she started dating and she, having no filter whatsoever, as she does, started yammering on about how good of a performer he was? Applejack cringed, the memories still fresh in her mind. Yep, she recalled with a shiver. And I still can't shake what she said about the sweet potato pancakes. Bleh. Twilight nodded. So, I feel like my confession would be the same level of awkward. Well, that said, I still think you just need confidence. Don't be that direct. There's a hell of a difference between just dumping your affection all at once and showing her you're interested in a date. I know, AJ, but... Twilight stammered, sitting. How do I do that? How do I do that well? Applejack placed a hoof on her chin as she pondered, debating how to translate her thoughts so that Twilight would understand better. Here, I'll show you, the farm pony said, dipping behind a tree and, finally, finding a use for the scant acting skills she'd learned in heartwarming pageants, Nightmare Night cosplays, and Rarity's boudoir. She waltzed from behind the tree after a second, and, much to Twilight's amusement, assumed her attributes, playing the shy, nerdy princess of friendship in a shockingly accurate fashion. Well, hi, Tempest, Applejack exclaimed in a scarily accurate imitation of Twilight's voice, ditching her country accent entirely, and acting bashful in the way that only Twilight could. I was hoping, I don't know, that you maybe, possibly, kinda, wanted to go on a date? No, wait, don't freak out. There isn't any pressure, you know. I was just curious. You don't have to accept. It was just, a crazy idea. Applejack laughed in that nervous way Twilight tended to when she felt flustered, be it from a particularly scandalous passage from a book, or from a particularly scandalous sculpture, or from the particularly scandalous advances of a hot pony. Twilight couldn't help but laugh a little at AJ's display. She couldn't deny its immaculate accuracy. Oh, well, if you don't want to, that's totally fine, Applejack continued. I'll just go get drunk at the Ponyville Tavern. She then dipped behind the tree again to conclude her little performance, chuckling. That was pretty accurate, apart from the drunk part, Twilight declared with a chuckle of her own. Reyes calls it artistic license, Applejack bragged with a smile. But seriously, that's an example of how not to get a date. After a pause, she added, Okay, maybe a pity date, but still, that's not what you want, right? Twilight shook her head. Of course not. I'd be there for her. Exactly, replied Applejack. So, allow me to show you how you should ask her on a date. Applejack rounded behind the tree again. Inwardly, she told herself, All right, AJ, don't buck this up, or this is going to make you a laughing-stock. When she re-emerged again, she still embodied some of Twilight's mannerisms, but possessed newfound assertiveness. Hey, you Tempest, AJ started in an accurate imitation of Twilight's voice with a smirk on her face. How's it hanging? Hey, I was wondering, you interested in going on a date with me? I know it's a little sudden, but, She grinned flirtatiously, with half-lidded eyes, and resumed. I've kind of been into you for a while, and I want to get to know you personally. After a pause, Applejack continued, "Good thing I have a library card, because I am checking you out." Twilight blushed and she snorted as she fought the urge to laugh hysterically, as that had been a pickup line she'd planned to use before. "You'll go out with me?" "Yes! I'm so excited!" "What time are you thinking?" 7? "Sounds great. See you then." AJ squeaked excitedly, then trotted giddily around the tree. She returned as her usual self. "How was that, Twilight?" she asked with a snicker. "I've never been so offended in my entire life," Twilight laughed, her giggles spilling out at last. "By the way, that pickup line was almost as good as Pinky's favorite line. You know the one." Applejack dropped into an imitation of Pinky, lifting her eyes and saying softly, "Did you just come out of the oven? 'Cause you are hot." At this, Twilight burst out laughing. Applejack's imitations were so accurate that it hurt. Applejack shared a laugh with her, before saying, "So, do you get what I'm driving at with the whole confidence thing?" Twilight nodded and confirmed, "Yeah, I do, Applejack. Don't be a nervous wreck, speak honestly, and try to be a little flirty." "Yep," Applejack replied. "You can do anything you set your mind to, Twi, especially since you've faced down more than a few villains in your life, Tempest included. I can't imagine you being afraid of anything ever again." Twilight smiled softly as she stood up. "You really think so?" she asked, blushing a little and rubbing her shoulder awkwardly. "You're not just saying that to boost my confidence, are you?" "Twilight, how the hell have you got it in your head that I'd say anything but the daggone honest truth?" Applejack replied, walking over and giving her friend a hug from the side. "I think you could be one of them femme fatales in those Shadow Spade novels Rarity likes so much." "Good point, AJ," Twilight returned, echoing her friend's affirmation of her element of harmony. "Good point, but it's femme fatales." The two ponies hugged, connected as only true friends could be. "Thank you, Applejack," Twilight said after a couple of seconds. "I'm feeling a lot better." "Good to hear," Applejack said in return, shivering slightly as a soft summer breeze blew through her mane. "Now, anything else you need my advice about?" Twilight blushed and nodded, saying, "Do you know any more pickup lines? Maybe if I were, potentially, interested in a little, more than dating?" A mischievous grin broadened across the farm pony's muzzle. "Ya alluding to, rollin' in the hay?" Twilight's eyes glimmered and her wings involuntarily fluttered. "Yes," she softly confirmed, shivering a little at the thought. Applejack guffawed loudly. "Well, there is one I told Rarity a few weeks back. She almost fainted." "Damn," Twilight said in shock, her mouth hanging open. "It was that jaw-dropping?" Applejack smirked smugly. "Let's just say she probably took a shower or two after she got home." Twilight raised her eyebrows, her curiosity piqued. Applejack snickered before leaning in and whispering. On the other side of Sweet Apple Acres, Big Mac hummed softly as he walked back towards the farmhouse after a hard day of work in the fields, thoughts of his soft, inviting bed dancing in his head. Slowly and sleepily, he entered and trotted up the stairs, with muscles sore and aching harder than the time he got involved in a brawl out in Appaloosa. He was just about to enter the shower when, distantly, he heard a mare's familiar, incredibly flustered voice, letting out a distant, incredibly flustered yell. "Holy bucking shit, Applejack!" Not thinking much of it, he shrugged and stepped into the shower. The afternoon sun began its descent over Ponyville, and the blue sky gradually transitioned from azure to warm, friendly orange. With only a handful of days until the running of the leaves to mark the beginning of autumn, ponies were mingling and excitedly chatting in the crisp, cool evening air. Foals rushed through the streets playing tag with their friends. Here and there, a bar opened for the evening. A gang of friends laughed loudly at some stupid joke their buddy had made. The smell of food wafted through the streets. Music played somewhere through the streets, likely vinyl scratch at her outdoor DJ booth, remixing whichever song by Sapphire Shores or Lady Rara was at the top of the charts this week. Now and then, an older song would float through the breeze, something slow and country-like, with swooning guitars and lyrics about a hometown the protagonist longed to return to. All in all, a warm, comforting environment, awash in the comforting orange light of a calm, late summer evening, at 5 in the evening. Amid all of the revelry, Tempest Shadow ducked and dodged the gazes of every pony she encountered. She stealthily attempted to zip behind stacked crates, hide behind lampposts, and crouch beneath windowsills. Slathered in Rarity's onslaught of makeup, she wouldn't exactly appreciate being noticed, and her adrenaline level was still quite high from the tense confession of her feelings about Twilight to her fashionista friend. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in a shiny window pane and went wide-eyed. She certainly looked different. Her eyelids were coated in magenta eyeshadow eyeliner for good measure. Tempest cringed, quite self-conscious of how she looked, partially due to the fact she wasn't accustomed to seeing herself beautified in any fashion, and partially because she couldn't reasonably predict how Twilight would react. She could only imagine Twilight's reaction to the little black dress Rarity had gifted her, which was tucked in her saddlebag. Thin and subtle, dotted with shiny sequins, it was pretty, but having grown up in an environment where dressing seductively wasn't considered appropriate, Tempest wasn't exactly comfortable. She was a mare of monotony, efficiency, and ruthlessness, as the Storm King had required her to hunt down magical relics and ponies alike 24/7. Tempest would be lying if she said she wanted to return to her previous life, but, occasionally, her new life in Ponyville was stressful. Everything she had to relearn, everywhere she had to see again, every pony she had to face. Some days it was simply too overwhelming, and sometimes she resolved to while away her hours huddled up in her apartment, trying to de-stress using the advice of her medical professionals. The tears she had shed over the course of the year she had lived in Ponyville had been by far the worst part. Knock, knock, knock. Tempest, realizing she'd been staring vacantly at herself in the window's reflection, yelped and jumped backwards. "Oops," said the large brown earth pony behind the window as he opened it. "Sorry, miss. I didn't mean to scare you." "Oh, you didn't," Tempest lied, her heart pounding like a drum behind her ribs. "You sure?" the earth pony asked. "I saw you jump back like you'd seen a flock of angry flighters." "Yeah, well, I gotta run. Sorry for fogging up your window." The unicorn quickly rushed off. "No problem," the other pony called after her. "Nice shade on your eyes, by the way. Might have to buy my wife some for Hearts and Hooves Day." "Hearts and Hooves Day can bite my fuzzy flank right now," Tempest thought to herself, her whole body a quivering ball of nerves as she continued slaloming to avoid the crowds, slipping into alleyways and sneaking behind obstacles. With her apartment being only a block or so away, she only had to avoid the little park before she was home free. However, it was occupied by the Cutie Mark Crusaders, helping yet another blank flank find their cutie mark, introducing them to grass mowing. Tempest had to alter her plan accordingly, since the CMCs knew her personally, and would likely embarrass her in front of everyone. If she utilized one of the clotheslines hanging overhead, she could possibly hop over several roofs to reach her apartment, like how she used to in her warrior days. If she timed it just right, she could avoid the gaze of the CMCs, dodge the crowds, and enter the window of her bathroom, where she could easily— "Hi, Tempest!" Tempest shrieked and leapt high enough to reach one of the aforementioned clotheslines. She stumbled backwards and nearly fell on her own flank in the dirt. Rearing up onto both hind legs, one hoof rested on her chest to soothe her throbbing heart, and the other instinctively raised in a combat position. She was more than willing to employ her knowledge of extra equestrian martial arts, learned during her service of the Storm King, to deal with whoever had the audacity to surprise her. Twilight giggled softly, amused by Tempest's over-the-top reaction, saying, "Sorry, Tempest. I didn't mean to scare you like that." If it were any pony other than Twilight, Tempest most likely would have kicked their flanks into the following moon. But due to who it was, she resisted the urge and returned to all fours again. "Hey, Twilight," she stammered, involuntarily chattering her teeth. "Mind if we talk for a minute?" Twilight asked, beckoning invitingly. Yeah, sure," Tempest said. As she followed her crush, she struggled to keep her knees from knocking. "Sure is nice out tonight, isn't it?" Twilight asked, her demeanor cheery and uplifting. "Look at the sun! Princess Celestia outdid herself tonight." Tempest's downcast eyes, staring vaguely in the direction of Twilight's flanks and rear legs, jerked upwards to consider the sunset. "Yes, it is pretty tonight. A great night for— well, Her face flushed awkwardly. "Smooth, Tempest, smooth," she inwardly cautioned herself. "A great night for what?" Twilight asked, her adorable smile making Tempest's heart flutter. "For a pint of cider, or for, I don't know, A nice long walk in the woods? Tempest inwardly sighed in relief that she hadn't managed to make things awkward. Oh yeah, Twilight remarked. That sounds like it would be fun sometime. Just a slow, steady amble along the trail out to Sweet Apple Acres or something. She then took another look at Tempest's muzzle with a raised eyebrow, saying, Hey, is something different about you? I can't quite put my hoof on it. Maybe, Tempest replied with a slightly hoarse voice, struggling to conceal her blush. Twilight inspected her face, and her eyes lit up as she noticed the subtle change. Hey, you did something new with your eyes. Tempest blushed as her gaze was met by Twilight's violet eyes, brushing through her fur with one hoof. Yeah, I was just trying out a new look, she lied, wanting to spare Twilight the horrors of being on the receiving end of one of Rarity's mane and makeup sessions. I really like it, Twilight replied. That shade complements your fur really well. And you look beautiful with that eyeliner. Thank you, Tempest managed to say softly, after a few seconds of being too stunned to speak. The soft and admiring tone of Twilight's voice was enough to stir chords within her soul, and she felt her spirits bubble up again. She longed to feel the way she felt when she heard Twilight say she was beautiful for hours. A buzz crept into her heart and made her shiver in happiness. And you know, your mane looks really pretty today, too, Twilight went on. It's all shiny and silky. Damn, some pony hit up the spa today, eh? Yeah, I hit up the spa, Tempest merely said to voice her thoughts, fighting against her nerves with every single ounce of her willpower. Twilight? Twilight met the unicorn's quizzical tone with a curious gaze. Yes? I was wondering if I could... Tempest, are you okay? Twilight asked, concerned. You're kinda stuttering, and your knees are jittering. The unicorn stopped in her tracks and sighed deeply. Okay, I need to say this before I lose my nerve. I was wondering if you were... Twilight's eyes widened as realizations clicked into place in her mind. Was she really? I wanted to know, Tempest stammered, trying her hardest to penetrate the veritable fortress of nerves and anxiety. If you want to go on a date? Twilight asked excitedly, her eyes wide. A broad, adoring smile beamed across her face. I wanted to know if you wanted to go on a... Wait, huh? Tempest asked shocked. How'd you know? Because I was going to ask you the same thing. Twilight rushed to hug the purple mare. Tempest's jaw practically fell to the cobblestone pavement below as she stood, stunned and bewildered. Despite her best efforts, nothing could have possibly prepared her for the real thing. Do you want to go on a date with me? She managed to squeak out, as her voice faded into an adorable mew. Of course! Twilight whooped and pranced in elation, bouncing around with the vigor Pinkie Pie sported at any given moment. She danced, posed dramatically, and shook her rump in the air, shouting, Bite my fluffy purple ass, Trixie! I can get a hot date! Across the street, Trixie Lulamoon heard her remark. She rolled her eyes, turned, and walked down another avenue away from the giddy mare, although it was clear by her expression that Ponyville's local stage magician harbored a bit of jealousy at her accomplishment. Twilight vibrated excitedly as she faced Tempest. Where would you like to go? Tempest perked up hopefully. I've heard good things about the Sunflower Grill. Twilight let out a squeak at this. The Sunflower Grill? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh! I've always wanted to go there. Well, I suppose we can see if it's as good as they say. I'd love to, Twilight chirped. Tempest struggled to devise an appropriate time suggestion, as her mind was overwhelmed by the reality of a situation which had played out so many times in her head, often ending in negative ways. Does 7:30 work? Twilight very quickly agreed. 7:30 sounds perfect. So, I'll see you there, then? Tempest nodded, giving her date a nervous smile. Twilight squeaked excitedly and leapt into the sky, taking flight and ascending in a spiral pattern. I can't wait! She cried as she flew off in the direction of her castle, practically creating a sonic boom in her wake. Tempest couldn't avert her gaze as Twilight flew through the sky, her heart fluttering like a hummingbird flitting between flowers. She rubbed her misty eyes and felt that maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to be so anxious. Lady? Came a young colt's voice from next door. Yeah, kid? Tempest said, staring off into space, her mind awash with thoughts of Twilight. Are you feeling okay? You look like you're about to cry. Tempest snapped back to reality, and the level of nervousness she was feeling immediately spiked as she realized she had an audience. Tempest blushed and dashed for the door to her apartment, ignoring the concerned voices of the crowd behind her. She quickly slipped into her home and slammed the door behind herself, leaning up against it as she panted uncontrollably. After sufficient de-stressing in the comforting privacy of her apartment, Tempest laid and stretched onto the floor in relaxation. As the realization of what she had agreed to do with the pony she admired more than any pony else sank in, she gazed down at her saddlebag and noticed the sequins adorning the little black dress she had been gifted glinting in the last vestiges of sunlight. She wasn't sure whether to cry from elation or worry. A tasteful date. Spike spit out his drink upon hearing the news from the doorway to the bathroom. "You're going on a date? Without me?" Twilight couldn't keep herself from laughing as she straightened her mane in the mirror, her fur still wet from the shower she had taken several minutes prior. "Yes, Spike," she replied cheerily. "I'm going on a date, and while I'd love your company at the Sunflower Grill, it's meant to be more of a private thing." Spike's jaw dropped when he heard the name of the location. "The Sunflower Grill? Isn't that place kind of expensive?" "It's worth a few extra bits, considering the pony who's coming with me." "Who is it?" Spike asked, his mind racing to estimate who Twilight could possibly have asked out. It couldn't be one of her close platonic friends, especially not Rarity or Applejack, since they obviously weren't available. Rainbow Dash was busy with her job as a Wonderbolt, Cheese Sandwich and Pinkie Pie were dating long distance, and Fluttershy had been spending all her time with Discord and her animals. It also couldn't be Starlight Glimmer, since her relationship with Twilight was far more platonic, and since Starlight often spent time with Trixie, alone in her office at the School of Friendship. "I'll give you a hint. Her name rhymes with Fizzlehop Cherry Mist." Spike's eyes widened and he leapt into the air in shock, flapping his wings as he hovered. "No way! You're going on a date with Tempest?" Twilight chuckled slyly. "You bet I am," she sang a little. "Celestia's holy rump," Spike breathed in awe. "I never thought I'd see the day you actually took the first step with her. You've been interested in her for a while, but I thought you were too nervous to actually say anything." Applejack helped me be a little more confident. Twilight squeezed herself with both of her forelegs in front of the mirror. "And oh my gosh, I'm shocked I didn't do it sooner. I literally feel like I'm dreaming right now. I can't wait." She resumed brushing her mane, giggling like a school filly. "Wow, Twilight," Spike marveled. "I haven't seen you this excited since Star Swirl gave you his first edition copy of 8-Bits Volume 1, the one autographed by Neiichiro Roda himself." "Pfft," Twilight dismissed. "As much as I'm honored and proud to own one of the first copies of the Reed Hat Pirates' Adventures, it isn't as much of an honor as me actually going on a date with Tempest herself." She let out a little giggle as she finished styling her mane. She had withdrawn it into a ponytail, in a way that accentuated her muzzle and facial features. The idea was to make herself look fancier and a bit more presentable. "How do I look, Spike? Anything I need to change?" she asked, a little bit nervous. "You look great, Twilight," Spike replied enthusiastically. "Heh," he added with a smirk. "I bet you 20 bits she'll absolutely fall head over horseshoes for you. If you guys decide to come back to the castle, don't worry. I'm going to that one joint in Discourse dimension where you can get some root beer floats with him and Big Mac, so you'll have plenty of privacy. Just remember to keep your nose clean, if you know what I mean." He winked and snapped. Twilight shied away from the little dragon in shock, blushing and grimacing like mad. In all of her planning for a potential date with Tempest, she hadn't considered what her date would want after their evening together. Her mind was instantly inundated with risque imaginary scenarios where either she or Tempest were pinning each other down, and Tempest was running a hoof gently straight down her spine down to the base of her wings, and Twilight firmly shook her head to banish the indecent thoughts. Miracle of miracles, it worked, and, after regaining her composure, she spoke. "Well, this is only our first date, so she probably wouldn't want to, you know. You can be like the mare in leather and leg locks." Spike waggled his eyebrows mischievously. Twilight blinked. "And how exactly do you know about that book?" "Let's just say I was working at the boutique, I was bored, and Rarity lent me a big box full of romance novels to take home," Spike explained. "That one was at the bottom of the box. Personally, the whole riding crop thing wasn't that interesting, but the story was kind of entertaining, I guess, not gonna lie. Must be nice being a business dragon like Slow Dancer. All the mares lined up outside your door." Twilight face-hoofed. Okay, Spike, when I get home, you and I are going to have a long talk about what sort of books are appropriate for you to be reading. I'm not so sure about the look, Tempest, Grubber said, munching on a cookie, one of several he'd lifted from the jar on the kitchen counter. I mean, I've heard that black is in this season, but, is it going to stay fashionable? I don't know. Will it? Tempest's knees quaked with nervousness. She appraised herself in the mirror, considering her figure clad in the black dress Rarity had gifted her. The sequins sparkled in the light of the fire her little hedgehog friend had ignited in the fireplace, blinking with little pips of light as though she were wearing the stars of the night sky. The halter strap draped over her left shoulder, exposing her muscular upper foreleg and her right shoulder. The shapely bust of the dress insinuated her barrel fluff in a way she hoped would be considered alluring. Tempest certainly didn't consider it complaining, least of all to Rarity, but the attire seemed noticeably breezy. It's just, well, to be honest, this is really hard for me. I got so used to seeing you the way you were even before the Storm King, and I never thought I'd see someone like you go on a date. And it's Twilight. Nerdy and cutesy and softy Twilight sparkle. You and me both, but, here we are, Tempest replied. Could you grab my brush? Sure thing, Tempest. The little hedgehog dashed into the bathroom to retrieve the requested item. Tempest considered her reflection in the mirror. The shade adorning her eyelids Rarity had subjected her to complemented the dress extremely well, and attracted attention to her intense, focused eye contact. Her mane, though still in the same mohawk she was accustomed to wearing, felt smooth and silky as she brushed one hoof through it. As she reached out with her other hoof and touched her reflection, a rush of wonder surged through her whole body. At some point, she had transitioned to appearing feminine. Tempest had never been the best judge of fashion or beauty, but, admittedly, she looked beautiful. In a way, she was thankful for Rarity's mane and makeup session, because if she hadn't suffered through it, the new look she experienced wouldn't have been enhanced to quite the same degree. Twilight, she said softly, will you love me? Tempest closed her eyes and smushed her cheek against the mirror, clenching her eyes and struggling not to cry. The golden opportunity she found herself in was so opportune, she suspected, somehow, she would find a way to ruin it. What if she would be overdressed? What if the food wasn't any good? What if Twilight didn't feel the same way she did? Her mind bent beneath the weight of what-ifs. Tempest? Grubber asked softly, offering her favorite brush with a sympathetic smile on his face. Tempest took the brush in her hoof and ran it through her mane delicately. Grubber stepped beside her and lingered close to her foreleg. Are you okay? He asked, looking up past his friend's muzzle, scrunched with worry. Tempest uttered a sad sigh. I'm scared, Grubber, and, there isn't much to say apart from that. Scared of what? The hedgehog asked. Scared of what? Tempest echoed, a little incredulous. Scared of what? I'm going on the first date of my entire life with a pony I fantasize about, and I have no idea what she's going to think of me. Do I not have a right to be scared? Well, when you put it that way. Ugh! Tempest turned away from the incessant stares of her friend and her own reflection. After a couple of seconds, she spoke again, her voice slightly choked up. I don't know if I can go through with this. I mean, what if she... What if? Rubber ejected. Hold the Celestia damn Collins spell. You're this afraid over a what if? He punctuated his interjection with a loud crunch as he bit into another cookie. Tempest, come on. You faced down so many creatures. You kicked the flanks of everyone you've come across. And you stood up against our old boss with Twilight and her friends. Do you have any idea how many ponies, and hedgehogs for that matter, think you're the best damn thing since the invention of the cupcake? Do you have any clue how many villains would be ruling Equestria right now if you got caught up in every last what if that ever popped into your head? I can think of at least one. The hedgehog waddled over to her and gently rested one of his little sugar-covered claws on his friend's foreleg. Tempest shied away a little, but she couldn't deny his presence was comforting. She looked down at him with misty eyes. Don't focus on what-ifs. Focus on what is. And what is that you're awesome. Damn it, I want to see you happy. By any means necessary. You've been through enough by this point, haven't you? He brushed his claws along her foreleg to soothe her. Tempest blinked the moisture from her eyes and cracked a small, genuine smile. She knelt so as to be at eye level with the little hedgehog. Thank you, Grubber, she whispered softly. You're honestly the best friend I could ever ask for." She wrapped a foreleg around him and drew him in tightly. The hedgehog reciprocated the embrace, knowing she needed the support. "You're welcome, Fizzlepop." The two remained together for a few seconds longer, before Tempest released him and stood to her full height. "You feel better?" Grubber asked, munching on another cookie. "Yeah," Tempest answered. "Still jittery, but better." "Good to hear," Grubber said as he waddled over to the apartment door and opened it for her. "Now, get out there and have some fun with Twilight. Wine her, dine her, and then, well, who knows?" He looked to her as if expecting an answer. Tempest's face went crimson from the implication, and she grimaced from embarrassment. She didn't think a first date would end with anything more than whining and dining, but, well, what if? No, 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 Tempest, stop it, she thought to herself. You can do this. You can do this. You can do this. She shook her head to rid herself of her jitters and briskly trotted out into the evening air. Cold assaulted her body immediately. The dress really was breezy. Stomach-rumbling wisps of food filled Twilight's nostrils as she trotted up to the gate of the Sunflower Grill. She noticed a chalkboard sign was positioned outside of the restaurant, displaying fancy text. Twilight neared and read its contents. Special today, the old-fashioned. Grilled mushrooms, boiled asparagus, tofu patty with side of gourmet crinkle-cut fries, sauce of choice. 25. Entrees. Happy evening omelet. Omelet with oregano, parsley, tarragon, with side of choice. 15.50. The Everfree Foresta cheese. Broccoli with creamy cheddar cheese sauce. 18.45. Grilled cheese of champions. Cloudsdale-style grilled 4-cheese sandwich on buttered white bread, with side of Italian-style fried cheese sticks and olives. 20.95. Sweet entrees. Pinkie Pie's favorite waffles. Stack of 3 large, deep waffles topped with fresh strawberries, apple slices, whipped cream, cherry. 12.25. Flatter than Dodge Junction crepe. French-style sweet crepe topped with sliced banana, blueberries. 8.50. Drinks. Red wine, 10. Apple cider, 8. White wine, 10. Apple juice, 12. Sparkling water, 5. Wow, Twilight murmured to herself. This place has great options. I can't remember the last time I had brock and cheese. From inside the restaurant, a soft jazz melody played. The enticing scent of food, the crisp evening air, the restaurant's warm and inviting atmosphere, and the music coming from within certainly contributed to an overall ambience. Already, anticipation building, she felt ready to wine, dine, and shine with her date. Twilight shivered slightly as a soft evening breeze blew through her mane. She trotted in place to maintain blood circulation in her legs. Regretfully, the strap of her satchel draped over one shoulder wasn't sufficient to keep her warm, and it was all she had. "All right, Twilight," she said to herself, trying to calm her jitteriness by talking. "Should you pick out what you want to eat before or after Tempest shows up? Pros, it means you already know how many bits you'll be spending, and you can anticipate exactly what you'll eat. Cons, you haven't seen the full menu yet, and you don't know if there'll be something even better waiting for you. Plus, Tempest might like wine. Or maybe she'd go for the cider? It might be a little boozy for her, but she once told me she had a sweet tooth. Didn't she? And she might be allergic to something? I probably should have asked her earlier. Damn it. Okay, so I can just ask her before we make our order, and then... Twilight? In the midst of her twilighting, Twilight hadn't noticed Tempest approaching from the rear. With a yelp of surprise, she rounded to see her date, and, immediately, her eyes bulged, she gasped, her cheeks flushed, and her heart nearly stopped beating. Tempest looked amazing. The dress gifted to her by Rarity complemented her mane and the shade adorning her eyelids. Her svelte and wiry figure appeared as though it were poured into the very shape of the dress, like molten iron permeating a mold. When she shifted nervously on her hooves, the dress moved with her, and its sequins glinted in the light of Luna's rising moon, bearing patterns which resembled constellations she had learned when she was just a filly. Tempest looked like she wore the heavens themselves. All of that, coupled with the halter strap over one shoulder, and the way the dress's bust accentuated the purple unicorn's barrel fluff, Twilight realized nothing could possibly suit her more. How do I look?" Tempest asked warily, trying to pose in a way she thought might be alluring, standing with one hoof lifted slightly to present some of her back leg. Twilight didn't answer for a few seconds as she felt blood rushing to her face, hearing her heartbeat in her ears. She felt lightheaded as her wings fluttered involuntarily. All that mattered to her was treasuring Tempest in her downright exotic and glamorous display, food and drink and manners aside. "Twilight?" Tempest asked, a little nervous. "You've got something, like, right there." She pointed to her muzzle with one hoof to indicate its location. Twilight, in her enamored state, subconsciously swept a hoof across her muzzle, below the chin, and immediately felt something cold and wet and sticky. "Huh?" Twilight yelped, looking down at her hoof. She didn't realize she'd been drooling. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. You look overdressed, right?" Tempest glumly finished for her. "I get it. This is too much for a casual dinner." She turned to leave. "Tempest, you are hotter than the sun right now," Twilight interjected, causing the purple mare to freeze. I'm blown away," she continued. "I never thought I would see the day that you'd get all dressed up like this. Holy Celestia's horseshoes! You're making me feel feelings I never even knew existed." Tempest blushed and smiled a little. "Wow," she said in awe. "You really like my look that much?" "I do. I really, really do," Twilight responded, with the most adorable, adoring smile on her face. Little hearts practically orbited her head as she beheld the glory of her date. "Let's go in," she suggested after a couple more seconds of staring. Twilight quickly rushed to the door and opened it for Tempest. Above the door, a little bell rang to announce the presence of a new customer to the staff. "After you, pretty mare," she added with a little squee. Tempest, still in shock from Twilight's praising, slowly shuffled forward with a little smile on her muzzle, mumbling softly, "Thank you," as she entered the restaurant. Tonight might not be so bad after all, Tempest thought to herself. The interior of the Sunflower Grill was equally as cozy and inviting as the exterior. The L-shaped front counter by the entrance, where the cash register sat, was composed of a single slab of wood, glazed and treated and varnished to the point of mirror-smooth quality. Twilight found counting the knots within the counter, aided by warm yellow light coming from the inverted apple basket lampshades hanging from the ceiling, to be a fun little pastime. Behind the counter, porcelain mugs were arranged on a large rack, accompanied by glass cases and shelves holding a selection of tea leaves. The building's walls and sturdy frame were stone brick, interspersed with rows of wood paneling. A mural of Ponyville's environs, painted by a local artist, dominated the entire back wall of the restaurant, including the small lounge area surrounding an inviting, crackling fireplace in the rear corner. The lounge area, which a few ponies occupied as they drank their wine, was furnished with plush couches, also carved from wood. The atmosphere was especially welcoming and rustic, complete with hoof-woven wool rugs under hoof. Scattered throughout the restaurant, on both the ground floor and in the loft accessed by a spiral staircase, tables were arranged in a disorderly pattern, twisting like a snake slithering through grass. They were bench seats surrounding a smaller central table, capable of accommodating whole families or groups, and booths, divided from each other by wool macrame curtains for privacy. All of the furniture was expertly hewn from wood. Enough wood to clear out the stock of the average lumber yard. Potted plants and vines snaked through the quirky chaos as though they were invading the place. At every window, orange curtains were partially drawn, allowing the light from the booth's hanging lamps to shine onto the street to attract potential customers. Twilight heard a bell ding. She gazed up at the loft and noticed a dumbwaiter rising and falling as it brought ponies' orders to their tables. While her date was busy gawking at the artisanal interior of the Sunflower Grill, Tempest was still quite nervous. While the decor was warm and inviting, it was still overwhelming. She probably should have just suggested going to the Hayburger. That would require her going to the trouble of getting dressed up in awkward, revealing outfits. Imposter syndrome struck her powerfully, as though she were trespassing somewhere she shouldn't be. They approached the counter at the entrance, and a white and orange uniformed unicorn wearing a vest stationed behind it smiled warmly. "Welcome to the Sunflower Grill," she said cheerily. "My name is Cardamom, and I'd be delighted to get you a table. How many will be seated tonight?" "Table for two, please," Twilight requested, before wrapping one of her wings around Tempest, an action that elicited an audible "eep" from the purple unicorn. Twilight grinned as she continued in a sing-songy voice. Tempest and I are here on a date. Cardamom gasped softly, saying, "Oh my goodness! Lucky you, Miss, Tempest," she stammered, inwardly panicking while wrapped in the tender grip of Twilight's soft, feathery wing. "My name's Tempest Shadow." "Miss Shadow," Cardamom finished, levitating a pencil and jotting down their names on a sheet of paper behind the counter. "You're a lucky, lucky mare to be dating royalty. I mean, sharing a meal with the Princess of Friendship must be very exciting." Tempest blinked as clouds swirled in her mind. Her pupils having shrunken to the size of tacks, she tried to open her mouth to say something. "It's way more nerve-wracking than it is exciting," she thought to herself. Eventually, she managed to nod. "Excellent!" Cardamom levitated a pair of menus and walked out from behind the counter, motioning for Tempest and Twilight to follow. "Come on, I'll help you find a table." Twilight let out a soft squee and released Tempest from her feathery grip, trotting briskly after Cardamom with a spring in her step. Tempest, meanwhile, shuffled in Date's trail, trying to avoid eye contact with any pony else in the building for fear they would judge her. Cardamom led the pair through the Sunflower Grill's main dining area, passing by several enthusiastic customers who all offered glowing reviews of their orders. Seeing how the dining area was packed, only offering a small selection of tables, the waitress directed the two mares out through a set of double doors, which led to an exterior patio. The elegant patio contained about 15 picnic tables, made of hoof-carved mahogany, each furnished with a single brass candlestick and a small bowl of complimentary sugar cubes. At the center of the patio was a humble stone fire pit, which blazed with all of the warmth and coziness of a campfire in the woods. Encircling the patio from all sides was a barrier of trellises, interwoven with grapevines which enhanced the privacy of the whole area. The isolated part of the restaurant was sparsely populated and significantly quieter. This soothed Tempest's anxiety a bit, as she felt herself drawn by the beautiful decor. The soft jazz tune from inside of the restaurant played from a speaker mounted on the building's outer wall, and, in the peaceful silence outside, she could actually hear the piano notes and saxophone clearly. "This is our back patio," Cardamom explained, gesturing with one hoof to the area. "There's plenty of privacy and romantic ambience out here. Couples love it." "Sounds perfect, right?" Twilight asked, giving her date a nudge. "Yeah," Tempest mumbled quietly, feeling a newfound sense of relief after they had entered a less crowded place. Cardamom directed them to a table adjacent to the fire pit, much to Tempest's relief. She'd begun to shiver slightly in the crisp summer evening air, and, with a dress that was rather loose and slinky, she needed the extra warmth to feel comfortable. As Tempest sat down upon the seat cushion, she silently reveled in how soft it was, reminding her of the beautiful, adorable, cuddly pony that was her date. As Cardamom spoke with Twilight about what might have had something to do with ordering drinks, Tempest couldn't take her eyes off of the princess seated across from her. Something about the ponytail she sported was hypnotizing. The purple star-shaped clip tying it back gave the impression a literal shooting star flew through her mane. The stripe of cerise that ran through the length of her mane and tail was almost a perfect match in color. Tempest found herself staring into her purple eyes again, feeling as though she were being drawn in by the gravity of the strange astronomical object Twilight had recently educated her about. A black hole, the all-consuming attractor from which nothing, not even light, could escape. "Keep it together, Tempest," she told herself. "Letting on will ruin everything." Her heart had different thoughts. It was a different story. Tempest felt a soft smile creep across her face as her heart went ba-dump, ba-dump, ba-dump in her chest. Twilight said something, but Tempest was too lost in gazing at her date to hear it. On some level, it felt like experiencing one of her favorite dreams, but while wide awake. "Miss Shadow?" Cardamom suddenly asked. "Huh?" Tempest grunted, shaking her head to clear her mind of the thoughts that had been slowly creeping in again. "What?" she asked, embarrassed. "What sort of drink would you like?" Cardamom asked with a smile. "Our drinks are red wine, white wine, apple cider, apple juice, and sparkling water. We also have tea, iced tea, and seltzer." Tempest thought aloud, considering her options. "What did you order, Twilight?" "Oh, I ordered the red wine," Twilight replied. "I don't get to drink often. I tend to get kinda loopy if I do it too much. But I figured that we should make this date feel as authentic as possible." She gave Tempest a sweet smile, and it melted her heart even further. I'll have what she's having," Tempest said, gesturing to Twilight with her hoof. Very good choice, you two, Cardamom praised with an improving grin. I'll have it out for you in a few minutes. With that, the waitress unicorn levitated a pair of menus onto the table for the couple to peruse, before briskly trotting off towards the kitchen. A few seconds of awkward silence followed as Tempest struggled to make eye contact with Twilight, as she felt the warmth of the fire pit on her shoulders and exposed back. She tried to settle into the comfortable cushion beneath her flanks, wiggling around. "Hello?" Twilight asked softly with a light chuckle. "Huh? Oh, sorry," Tempest yelped with a sheepish grin. "I'm just feeling a bit nervous." Twilight smiled good-naturedly, saying, "This from the pony who reduced the Storm King to rubble and saved Equestria? You teach self-defense classes at the School of Friendship. I didn't think you had a nervous bone in your body, Tempest." She laughed a little, a gentle, melodic thing that only further stirred Tempest's soul. "Well, yeah, but every pony gets nervous sometimes." She hated how generic her reply sounded, and inwardly cursed herself for not thinking of a more intelligent answer. She also silently prayed Twilight wouldn't notice the bead of sweat forming on her brow. "I know how you feel," Twilight said with a soft sigh. "I get nervous about a lot of things. Like, there was this one time I forgot to write to Princess Celestia a few years ago. This was back when I would send her a weekly letter about what I'd learned about friendship, and the very thought that I'd be turning in an assignment that was late scared me to my core. I ended up I became a bit neurotic." Tempest was curious. "How so?" "Like, to the point that I infected an old toy with a want-it-need-it spell that made every pony in town desire it like their life depended on it to create an artificial friendship problem. Sort of against their will." Tempest's eyes widened, and for a few seconds she struggled to say anything. "Yeah," Twilight groaned. "Celestia wasn't very happy with me for doing that." "I can imagine," Tempest managed to stammer, shifting uncomfortably. A couple of seconds of silence went by before Twilight face-huffed. "I'm sorry, I'm probably oversharing, aren't I?" she asked bashfully. "Maybe a little," Tempest admitted. She glanced down at the table she and Twilight were seated around, and noticed small inscriptions on the wood. At first glance they appeared to be the carvings of a bored pony who'd been sitting there previously and perhaps scratched them in with a knife, or with a wood-burning kit. "Nice weather, huh?" Tempest inwardly cringed that she'd resorted to the lamest and most basic form of small talk, but hoped that Twilight would respond anyway. "Yeah, it is," Twilight breathed, observing the sky above. "Looks like the town weather team ordered the weather factory in Cloudsdale to leave things nice and clear tonight. Just look at the moon!" Tempest looked up at the moon in the sky, its soft white light shining down on Ponyville from afar. It was big and beautiful and bright, like a great spotlight diffused through a sheet, scattering its glory down onto Equus below. Tempest's mouth fell open slightly as she saw the detail in the craters. "It's gorgeous," Tempest marveled at the majesty. "And so are you," Twilight added, which caused Tempest's breath to hitch. When she, in a state of mild panic, looked back over at her date, she noticed the alicorn's eyes were full of affection, the kind she had only heard about in the fairy tales she was told by her parents when she was a filly. You think so?" Tempest asked, stammering a little and gulping quietly. "Tempest," Twilight said softly. "Of course. Now, relax. We're just here to talk and get to know each other better. I know. And I'm trying. For some reason I thought we already knew each other pretty well." "Tempest," Twilight replied, "I only see you maybe twice a month. Obviously I know you from all that happened with the Storm King and, how you captured me and took Olive Canterlot prisoner and—" "I get it," Tempest cut her off sharply, slightly sourly out of shame of the memories. She didn't feel angry exactly, but hearing her mention the regrettable days of her life so casually hurt. "Right," Twilight said, picking up on the subtext and dropping the subject of the Storm King incident entirely. "Anyway, I don't really know that much about you as a pony. Like, hobbies or interests, things that we can connect over." "Sure," Tempest responded. "Anything you'd like to know? I'll try to remember as much as I can." "I'm actually glad you asked," Twilight told her with a sweet smile, using her magic to loosen the satchel still slung around her shoulders. Out from the satchel came a book, suspended in Twilight's magic field, and the adorable book horse held it up for Tempest to read. Tempest squinted slightly. "A Guide to Making a Great First Date by H. Haybarn? Haybale? H. Haybale Bundle, Twilight finished, silently noting Tempest's apparent issue with her eyesight. He's a leading authority on courtships and dating, and I just so happened to get this copy at a book sale at the Manhattan Public Library. I found it for like 20 bits on the shelf, and I lost my damn mind when I saw it was a signed copy that used to belong to the mayor of Manhattan. Twilight grinned proudly. I was just a little excited. Tempest softly chuckled. You? Excited? Unheard of. Despite her nerves, she gave Twilight a good-natured, perhaps even mildly flirty smile to let her know of the sarcasm in her statement. Twilight laughed, a melodious noise of joy that sent Tempest's heart reeling and whirling and melting all at the same time. She is so perfect, she thought to herself. Yeah, I got a 5-bit fine for being too loud in the library, Twilight said with a mildly embarrassed snicker, blushing a little in the process. Anyway, he offers some suggestions on what to talk about when two ponies, or any creature really, are trying to get to know each other better on a date. I'm sure that we can find something to talk about. Twilight levitated the book onto the table, placing it to the side of where their plates would be going. She flipped through it as her horn glowed softly, searching for the correct page. Soon, Cardamom returned with a wine bottle and 2 stem glasses held aloft in her magic. Red wines, as requested, she sang cheerily, placing the glasses in front of the 2 before expertly pouring the wine into them. Tempest marveled at how skilled Cardamom was with her magic, and wished silently with everything in her that she could do something like it again. Thank you, Twilight sang cheerily, watching the deep red liquid fill the glass the way a curious foal would watch a bug crawling on a leaf. Hey, Tempest, have you ever had wine before? Tempest mused for a second before answering. Once, when I was young. If I remember correctly, I snuck into a neighbor's liquor cabinet and got in trouble for taking a sip or 2. Well, let's hope you don't get in trouble tonight, Twilight joked, before, her confidence boosted by a glance at the book's open pages below, in a section marked flirty phrases, adding with a slight smirk, unless you want to get into trouble. Tempest blushed at the particularly titillating comment. Ooh, Cardamom hummed as she poured the wine into Tempest's glass. Sparks are flying. She chuckled, then levitated the menus she had tucked under her left foreleg and placed them onto the table. Are either of you fillies ready to order, or would you like more time to make your selection? Tempest glanced at the sizable, folded-up menu. Buck me, she thought. This thing is massive. What the hell am I even supposed to pick? Maybe give us a few more minutes? Twilight asked, to which Cardamom nodded in confirmation and walked off to another table. Tempest gingerly lifted the glass of wine with one hoof and sniffed. She was not prepared for the wonderful smell that met her nostrils. A mildly sour but fruity aroma that flowed like a beautiful breeze. She sniffed once more, and noted the individual flavors within the liquid, listing them off in her mind. Raspberry? A hint of blueberry, too. Lilac, perhaps? Plum, most likely. What kind of skill goes into making wine? She wondered. Wow, Tempest marveled after a few seconds. It smells amazing. I know, right? Twilight asked, smiling as she levitated her glass. I caught a look at the bottle while Cardamom was over here. We appear to be drinking Cheval de Provence. I've heard it's excellent quality. Twilight then gave Tempest an optimistic smile and queried, Want to taste it for the first time together? Tempest shrugged, answering, Sure. With that, both ponies lifted their glasses and sipped in unison. Tempest's taste buds were promptly flooded with the rich, fruity taste of the drink. Her eyes shot open as her mind was completely blown by the sensation. It was like an explosion of sweet and sour detonated in her mouth as the chilled alcohol worked its way around her tongue. The alcohol was sharp and unsubtle, with a warming sensation running down her throat as she swallowed. Oh my gosh! She exclaimed, a bit more animated than she had been before. This is amazing. It really is, Twilight concurred, finishing her sip. Good year, too. Whoever made this really knew what they were doing. You can say that again, Tempest marveled. I never thought alcohol could actually taste good. The only real experience I'd had with alcohol before tonight was the rot-gut crap the Storm King provided in his rations. Tasted awful. How bad was it? Twilight asked, curious, taking another sip of her wine. It tasted like mud mixed with kerosene, Tempest replied snarkily. But this is nothing like that awful stuff. This is fruity and warm and delicious. It's wonderful. I'm really happy you like it, Tempest. Twilight said with a sweet smile. Wine is an excellent alternative to seasonal cider, and it's served year-round. Do they sell this wine here in Ponyville? Tempest asked, her eyes aglow with excitement. I just might start drinking the stuff regularly, like if I'm in the mood for some good food, or for some fun at a party, or, well... The excitement in her eyes waned slightly, as redness returned to her muzzle. On another date. Twilight's eyebrows shot up. Our first date isn't even over yet, and you're already talking about a second one? She stammered with a mildly embarrassed smile. I suppose I sort of am. Tempest was glad Twilight wasn't capable of performing mind-reading magic, because if she were, she might not like the thought swimming in Tempest's mind. I'd love to do this again soon, Tempest, but let's maybe finish this one first, eh? Tempest's eyes widened as she realized she'd accidentally agreed to go on a second date. She fidgeted in her seat, saying slightly absent-mindedly, Yeah, let's get through this one first. You idiot, she thought to herself, staring into space. As she sat in her seat, alone with her chastising thoughts, Twilight noticed something was off about her. Something more than simply nerves. There was a look in her date's eye that she couldn't discern the origins of, a look that told her something was wrong. Hey, Tempest, she ventured, causing Tempest to snap to attention with a soft yelp, her eyes focused on Twilight. Yeah, Twilight? She asked. The look in her eyes dimmed, but never faded. Something was wrong with Tempest's shadow, and Twilight wasn't sure what it was. But she was sure Celestia was going to find out. You seem a little distant. Are you okay? She asked, concern in her voice. Yeah, I'm fine, Tempest lied. Just getting a bit hungry, is all. Oh, I gotcha. The alicorn sighed slightly out of relief. I'm starving too. Mind if we look at the menu, Tempest? Not at all, Tempest stated, a little too quickly. She grabbed her menu and began to peruse it. Twilight did the same, holding the menu aloft by her magic, her violet eyes scanning the various dishes. She really wanted to get some brock and cheese in her belly. While she read the menu, she extended a hoof across the table, laying her foreleg flat on its surface. Tempest noticed this, and her eyes widened slightly. Twilight was busy reading the menu. Had it been intentional? She wasn't sure, but Tempest felt herself dismissing the overwhelming cautions of nerves and fear, and choosing to reach out. With a trembling hoof, she slowly raised her foreleg up to meet Twilight's. A bead of sweat traveled down the side of her muzzle as she did this, and she swished her tail back and forth a few times to try to flick the anxiety out of her body. It took everything within her to do it, but Tempest gingerly met Twilight's hoof with her own. Twilight let out a soft gasp, looking up from her menu and gazing down at where their hoofs connected. Tempest, surprisingly, didn't shy away when the two made eye contact. Instead of saying anything further, Twilight only gave her date a reassuring smile. It was at that moment Cardamom returned once more, noticing the two holding hooves. Ooh la la, she sang with a chuckle. Twilight chuckled. I think things are going great. What do you think, Tempest? Tempest, though with the concerning look in her eyes lingering, nodded in agreement. Yes, it's going well. Good to hear, the waitress pony replied. Are you ready to order? Ooh, yes, Twilight confirmed. I think I'll go with the broccoli and cheese, with extra cheese, and some crinkle-cut fries on the side. Cardamom quickly levitated a small notepad and a pencil with her magic, and wrote out Twilight's order. All right, got one brock and cheese, extra cheese, plus crinkle-cut fries. Cardamom finished writing Twilight's order with a flourish. And how about you, Miss Shadow? Tempest looked down at her menu again, retracting her hoof from Twilight's in the process. She started, considering her options. Can I get a... What exactly is a tofurger? Oh, it's a tofu burger, Tempest, Twilight explained, showcasing her bookish talents yet again. They make it from soy milk curds. Can I get one of those with some extra grilled vegetables? 2 patties, if that's okay? Cardamom nodded and wrote down Tempest's order. Do you want fries with that too? Tempest nodded, and sheepishly told the waitress, A large fry, please. The crinkle-cut ones. I'm very much a hay-burgers and fries type of filly. Sorry my order isn't interesting. No reason to worry whatsoever, Miss Shadow, Cardamom said cheerily, completing the order on her notepad as she also levitated the menus off of the table. We've got some of the best gourmet hay-burgers and tofurgers in town right here. Thank you for ordering, fillies. We'll get those right out to you in a few minutes. Twilight and Tempest both thanked Cardamom before the orange unicorn waitress disappeared back inside the restaurant with a spring in her step. After a few seconds of silence, Twilight turned her head back to face her date head on. So, Tempest, as I was saying earlier before we got our wine, I kinda want to get to know you a bit better. You've told me what happened to your horn, but not much else. Is that okay? Sure, Tempest said, dodging Twilight's gaze. What would you like to know? Twilight flipped to another section of the book on the table, seeking Dr. Haybell Bundle's advice. Upon arriving at a section marked Conversation Starters and seeing one of its suggestions, she queried, Well, what was your hometown like? Come to think of it, I don't think you've ever mentioned the name. Tempest frowned a little. I was born in a town called Berry Falls, about a day's journey from Windianapolis. It was named for nearby waterfalls powering some of the town's oldest mills back in the day. It wasn't exactly extravagant, just a little farming town in a valley. We primarily exported berries, of the blue, rasp, straw, black, crayon, elder, bar, lingon, cloud, poison, huckle, mole, goose, choke, crow, and snow variety. You name it, we had it. I don't remember that much apart from the big clock tower in the center of town that would always ring in a little tune that I adored as a filly. Twilight's eyes were wide with fascination and wonder at her date's story. Wow, I've never heard of Berry Falls. It sounds like a wonderful place. Tempest slowly nodded. It was, before, well, you already know what happened. But before all of that, before my horn, it was a beautiful place. My parents owned their own business, a little place called the Main Street Cherry Treat. Sugar Cube Corner reminds me of it quite a lot, actually. Really? Twilight asked. How so? Tempest's eyes grew a bit wistful, though there was a hint of a nostalgic smile on her face. It was a confectionery, a bakery, a soda shop, and an ice cream parlor, all rolled into one. We lived upstairs above the shop, and I'd wake up every day to smell something new being made in the kitchen. I remember my mom always let me try whatever baked goods she made, and wow, she could cook! Every day I'd get to try something new as a snack or dessert. The cupcakes were always my favorite. Tempest started salivating slightly at the memory. And my dad was the confectioner there. He once made these little candy flutes that I couldn't get enough of, both in terms of taste and musicality. I think I gave him their name in one of my weird little full hood rants. You know how ponies are when they're super young. He started calling them Toot Sweets. Tempest let out a snicker at this. Toot Sweets? Twilight asked, snickering as well. Isn't that from a musical or something? No idea, Tempest shrugged. That wasn't even my favorite. He would always make ice cream on weekends, and if I was well behaved the week before, he'd make me a special sundae. It was the first to really take off in Berry Falls. Tempest's eyes got misty for a moment. He made it with strawberry ice cream, white chocolate, banana, and cherries, and he always served it with a twist cone on top, and... Her voice faltered slightly with emotion as she said, And he called it the berry twist. Oh my gosh, Twilight breathed, her hooves flying up against her cheeks. Is that where... Tempest nodded. He named me after his greatest creation, but he always told me it was his second greatest creation, after me. Twilight's eyes practically had stars within them as she stared in sheer delight into Tempest's own soul windows. That's so sweet, Tempest. Like, geez. She sniffled slightly and brushed away a couple of tears from her eyes with one hoof. Why am I tearing up from that? It's one of my few good memories. Before the Storm King. Before the invasion, Tempest said, concluding her little history lesson. She seemed a little less anxious, and Twilight could tell that it was a good memory, although when Tempest brought up the Storm King, that off look was still there. What were your parents like? Twilight asked, fully enwrapped by her date's story. She hadn't needed a glance at the book at all. They were wonderful, Tempest began. My dad's name was Banana Surprise, and my mom's was Crumb Cake. They were both amazing. I remember my mom would always make the best snacks for me to take to school, and my dad was a part-time musician. My friends Glitter Drops and Spring Rain, they'd come over to my parents' shop after school and order ice cream while my dad sang. Well, whatever silly song he'd thought of at the moment. Back when my horn was intact, I'd help my dad serve customers at the counter during business hours. And my mom usually based whether or not her recipes were a success on my reactions to them. I always knew it would be a special day if she brought out the cakes bit. Twilight's eyebrow rose. Cake spit? As in a spit for baking cake. Cake baked on a spit, Tempest clarified, chuckling a little. You make a batter, soak the spit in the batter, and then rotate it steadily above an open fire. It makes beautiful little rings like the inside of a tree trunk. And oh my gosh, is it good! Light, firm, chewy, like biting into a cloud. And the icing! Tempest shuddered in happiness, her shoulders rolling from delight as she remembered the taste. Heavenly! She quickly brushed aside a drop of drool which descended from her mouth as she described the confection. Twilight, I swear to Sleipnir, if you haven't tried a spit cake, you haven't lived, Tempest concluded with a wave of her hoof, before taking another sip of her wine. It sounds amazing, Tempest. I'd love to try someday. Maybe you could make me one sometime? Give me a couple of private baking lessons? She half lidded her eyes and batted her eyelashes in an attempt to be flirty. Another recommendation by the book, of course. Tempest nearly choked on her wine, but fortunately managed to gulp it down before embarrassing herself. When she spoke, her breath was slightly ragged, and a blush crept across her muzzle. Thing is... Her teeth chattered as she stammered. She offered Twilight a hesitant smile. Twilight giggled a little at Tempest's flustered actions, finding them both sweet and attractive at the same time. It's okay if you don't want to, Tempest. No pressure. But I've got to admit, you being flustered like that was really, really cute. Cute? Tempest thought. She thinks I'm cute? She fought back misty eyes as she processed the word in her brain. How is this actually happening? Why did she... Am I really cute to her? What? No, this can't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. This has to be a dream, but I don't feel like I'm dreaming. Damn it, be still, my fluttering heart. Thank you, she gasped out after a few seconds, shivering like she was caught out in a blizzard. She chuckled nervously, unable to say anything more. How is she so adorable? Twilight thought to herself. Though something internal cautioned her not to, Tempest gingerly reached out for Twilight's hoof again, trembling like a leaf in the wind. They connected hooves, and Twilight offered her date a sweet, affectionate smile. Though Tempest reciprocated the smile, the look in her eyes returned distinctly. In fact, it was more noticeable than before. Twilight stared into her date's eyes, partially because of their beauty and partially to identify what exactly she was feeling deep down. As she looked, she wasn't totally sure, but, if she wasn't mistaken, the look that she found in her eyes resembled some form of self-loathing. Before Twilight could consider the implications, however, Cardamom returned with their food held in her magic. She levitated it onto their table. The smells of the freshly cooked meals were heavenly, enough to distract both mares from their anxieties and concerns. Tempest's mouth fell open at the sight and scent of her tofurger. She had never seen or smelled anything like the concoction before her. Unlike before, a bead of drool successfully slipped from her gaping mouth. Subconsciously, she released Twilight's hoof and placed both of her hooves on either side of her plate. "Enjoy your meal, lovebirds," Cardamom called out softly. "When you're ready, just leave the payment on the table, and I'll come get it later." "Thank you so much, Cardamom," Twilight smiled politely. "Have a wonderful night. You too, Princess Twilight. Enjoy your date." Cardamom then trotted back inside the restaurant to help serve other customers. Meanwhile, Tempest stared in awe at the tofurger before her. The warmth of the tofu patties and the burger's thick bun wafted under her chin, and the smell of the grilled vegetables beneath it enticed her to quickly consume it. "Whoa!" Tempest gasped aloud in fascination. "I've never seen anything like this before." "You've eaten hay-burgers. What do you mean?" Twilight was a little confused. "Well, yeah," Tempest replied, "but this is something new." She gripped the tofurger with both hooves and gingerly lifted it towards her mouth. Slowly, she took a bite. Almost immediately, she yelped in pleasure. "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" She struggled to find words to describe the tofurger. "This is incredible! What the heck is it made of?" "From what I remember hearing," Twilight recalled, using her magic to levitate a fork and stab into her pasta, "they're made with eggs, celery, and cheese, in addition to the tofu, plus an extra special ingredient." "What ingredient is it? 'Cause I need more of it." I don't think it has an official name, Twilight continued, but I think Pinkie told me once that it was called Celestine dust. Probably a brand name. Tempest took a larger and more eager bite of her tofurger. This is the best food I've had in moons, she marveled between bites. I can't believe I didn't think to come here sooner. Twilight smiled sweetly. I'm so happy, Tempest. Does it live up to your parents' cooking? I don't know, but it's definitely up there. She chowed down on more of her burger. You should try the fries, Tempest, she suggested. The menu says they're fried in peanut oil instead of vegetable oil. They're crispier than the ones at the Hayburger. It might be a fun treat. Tempest placed her tofurger down and lifted a fry from the small basket next to it. After sniffing curiously, she took a bite, and her eyes immediately rolled back in her head as she let out a shuddering, wavering moan. Wow! She tossed the rest of the fry into her mouth. How have I never tried this kind of food? Amused by Tempest's elation, Twilight spectated for a while, then levitated a forkful of pasta into her mouth. At once, the warm creaminess of the cheese, the warm earthy taste of the broccoli, and the soft, squishy, delectable texture of the pasta rolled over her tongue. Mmm, she groaned in happiness. The Hayburger has nothing on this. I think I might actually cry. Tempest stuffed her face with another bite of tofurger and chowed down in delight. While her date busied herself with feasting upon her meal, Twilight consulted the book again, seeking another appropriate question to ask Tempest. Given that the unicorn across from her was reveling in the taste of the tofurger, Twilight opted to ask a question less questionable in its intent. Ah, she thought to herself, here's one that shouldn't fluster her too badly. Hey, Tempest, since you brought up food, I've got to ask, what's your favorite food? Tempest politely gulped a bite of tofurger before answering. Honestly, I have no idea what I could count as my favorite. I just love food. If I had to answer, though, it would be sweets. Cakes, ice cream, chocolate, candy, pancakes, donuts. I love it all. I don't really know how to describe it, but I can taste things differently from other ponies. How so? Twilight asked. Her interest piqued. You know how ponies say water tastes like nothing? Well, I can taste if the water is from a spring, or if it contains metal, or if it's been filtered or processed or something. To me, even the temperature matters. When we got our wine, Twilight, I took a sniff of it, and I could tell the ingredients from one whiff. Whoa! Twilight breathed in shock. So, what's in the wine? To refresh her memory, Tempest sniffed her glass of wine again, then sipped. Raspberry, blueberry, lilac, and plum. Possibly cinnamon, too. Her eyes, half-lidded, went starry for a second as the wine moved and touched every inch of her tongue. Twilight's eyes widened, and she sat upright, straightening her spine. You mentioned that to Dr. Blossom, right? Did she say anything about super tasters, perchance? Tempest nodded. I read a book about it a while ago. Fascinating stuff. Did you know Pinkie is also a super taster? That's how she has such an intimate knowledge of baking. Explains a lot. Tempest reclined in her chair as the reality of what Twilight told her sank in. Gosh, I think you're right. She really can taste anything, huh? She recalled times Pinkie had endeavored to taste every flavor in Equestria. I should have known by the way she bakes. The patterns I see whenever I bite into one of her cupcakes are absolutely mind-boggling. Twilight, confused, called out, Wait. What? What patterns? What are you talking about? When I eat things and close my eyes as I'm chewing, I see these beautiful patterns of light dancing in my vision. Each flavor has its own pattern, too. Cheese has a soft, yellow starburst. She pointed to her crinkle-cut fries, and the excitement in her voice resounded like the echo of a foghorn penetrating fog. These fries have a swirling whirlwind of brown, earth-tone sparks. The wine has these cascading waves of scarlet and purple light, like a tsunami. She glanced up at Twilight to see her gorgeous violet eyes wide and an elated smile on her muzzle. When a bunch of flavors are combined into something amazing like this tofurger, it's like a fireworks display. Pinwheels and bursts and sparklers from the cheese and lettuce and celery and the eggs. I can see fountains of bright green every time I taste the celery, and ripples of warm yellow and white for the eggs. And that Celestine dust you brought up? She uttered a soft, shuddering moan of delight, her voice shaking like a leaf. It's like explosions going off in my brain. It almost makes me want to cry. She jumped up in her seat, giddily pranced, reared up on her hind legs, stretched her forelegs to the sky, and exclaimed, I love food, Twilight. I love food." She let out a slight squee of delight before plopping her flank back down in her seat with a joyful grin on her face. "Wow," Twilight said, her mouth open with an awestruck smile on her face. "Tempest, you did have a walk with Dr. Blossom about synesthesia, too, right?" Tempest considered for a minute before mentioning, Dr. Blossom did use that word during my mental health screening. It's when two senses overlap, right? Twilight nodded, with an eager expression. "Sounds like your taste and vision are crossed with each other. That explains what you see when you eat. And it isn't even just food. It happens with certain words, too. Like, if some pony says the word cloudy, I get a sharp, cold taste in my mouth, even if I'm sweltering hot. The word sunny produces a taste like fresh-picked daisies. Blue tastes like icy cold lemonade, and trees taste like pine sap." Her rant completed, Tempest took a deep breath to calm herself. "It's amazing," she whispered giddily, gazing fondly across the table at Twilight, whose eyes were glued to her. Just as she was about to go for another bite of Tofurger, she heard three words she never expected to hear from any pony. "You're amazing, Tempest." Tempest froze, looking back up at Twilight, who was now gazing with what Tempest hoped was love. I am? Of course you are," Twilight affirmed. "You're totally unique. I don't think I've seen any pony, not even Pinkie Pie, get as enthusiastic about food as you do. It's inspiring seeing you as happy as this. I've never seen some ponies so happy to bite into a French fry as you. Your senses differentiate you from every pony else in a unique way. I bet you could be a judge at one of Sweet Apple Acre's cider tastings, perhaps even the best judge they've ever had. You're so much deeper and complex than I ever imagined." Twilight reached her hoof forward to take Tempest's own, feeling the purple unicorn's body twitch and shiver at her touch. "You're one of the most amazing ponies I've ever met," Twilight said softly, her eyes conveying unadulterated admiration. "And I want to get to know you better. I want to really get to know you better." Tempest's mind was overwhelmed with a flurry of surprise, frustration, love, desire, shock, and concern, and her eyes lowered sheepishly. As Twilight took her hoof, she trembled slightly, and her breath hitched. Her mouth dropped open slightly, and she found herself choking up. The electricity of Twilight's touch rushed throughout her entire body, invigorating her soul in a way she had only dreamed of. I would like that too, Twilight," Tempest said softly, gazing into the entrancing violet eyes of the pony sitting across from her. It truly was a dream come true, and like all pleasant dreams, she was averse to it ending. "Tempest?" Twilight asked. "You said you can taste ponies' names," she said slowly. Twilight blushed, flustered, as she struggled to voice her thoughts. "What does my name taste like?" Tempest thought for a second, her gaze temporarily moving aside. She slowly closed her eyes and focused. "Go ahead and say your name, as if you were saying it for the first time." With an anticipatory smile on her face, Twilight obliged. "Hello, Twilight Sparkle here." Sensation danced like a ballerina across Tempest's tongue as soon as she heard the delectable, beautiful name. It started with a gentle caress of sweetness, like the flavor of strawberry ice cream, a pink ripple radiating across her entire field of vision, punctuated by rockets of sparkling, crackling purple. The sweet taste cascaded into gently rolling sour waves, like fresh lemonade, that swept across the depths of her mind like ocean tides. Then sweetness returned, like a frosted eclair or the gooey center of a jawbreaker. The sensation rushed up and down her spine from the base of her skull to the depths of her tailbone, making her heartbeat accelerate. "Sweet," she softly stated, her mind in a state of absolute bliss. She opened her eyes to meet Twilight's gaze, with an adoring smile creeping across her face. "Your name is Sweet, just like you." "Aww," Twilight crooned. Her ears flopped downwards as she rubbed her hoof back and forth in her date's grip. "That's the most romantic thing any pony's ever said to me, Tempest. Thank you." Tempest felt a little woozy and lightheaded as the implications of what the alicord had been telling her sank in further. She likes me, she thought. She really likes me. Maybe she even loves me. Oh my gosh, my heart. Maybe I was worried for nothing. Maybe Rarity was right and I do deserve love. I just have to tell her. I have to tell her how I feel. "Twilight? Yeah, Tempest? There's been something I've wanted to talk to you about for a while." "What is it?" Tempest took a couple of deep breaths like how Dr. Blossom had taught her, steeling herself in her nerves, her confidence slowly climbing in increments. In and out. In and out. "I've been wanting to tell you this for over 9 months, she began. "It started after you saved me from being sucked into the Storm King's tornado. I didn't know it for sure then, but later, at the party in Canterlot, when you told me my horn was powerful, just like the pony it belonged to, I felt something. Something that I didn't even know I could feel. Not since my parents split and my horn was destroyed. And when I launched that magic burst into the sky, and then I saw you, so proud of me, so approving and forgiving of me. You and your friends didn't mock me for my name. I'm babbling, aren't I? I don't know why I'm struggling so much with this." "It's okay, Tempest," Twilight reassured her, stroking her hoof along Tempest's foreleg, which only further flustered the unicorn. "Twilight," she said, trying not to faint from nerves and from flusteredness, "I wanted to tell you that Twilight leaned closer and sat on the edge of her seat. "The thing is, I realized that I'm in She took one last deep breath. "Twilight, I realized that I'm in Oh my word! Ew!" A loud, obnoxious, haughty voice shrieked and interrupted Tempest's confession. Both mares looked in the direction of the shout and spotted a middle-aged white unicorn mare with a short mane cut, dressed in a fine silk dress and a large sun hat, slathered in entirely too much makeup, sitting at a table by herself and recoiling in blatant disgust. "Who allowed you to dine here?" the mare shrieked, pointing one hoof directly at Tempest. "What, me?" Tempest asked, pointing to herself in shock and horror. "Yes, you empty-headed dolt," the mare hissed icily. "I have traveled all the way from Manhattan to escape reject ponies such as yourself, yet here you are, sharing my patio." Tempest's eyes widened and her mouth fell open, but before she could get a word in edgewise to defend herself, the Manhattanite mare continued her tirade, attracting attention from the other diners on the patio. "It was terrible enough that Princess Celestia pardoned a traitor such as yourself after what you were responsible for in Canterlot, but now you dare to infiltrate this environment and foul it with your presence?" The mare raised both of her forelegs to indicate Tempest, as though she were presenting a lecture. She succeeded in attracting attention to herself, and, by extension, Tempest. "Cripple!" she shrieked. "You're a dreadful stain on the tapestry that is the unicorn race. Useless, good-for-nothing, low-born, filthy, common, can't even levitate a pencil, dud!" The other patrons of the restaurant who were listening to the hateful speech shouted in protest. "You can't say that," a stallion called out from the opposite side of the patio. "Why'd you bring race into this?" an offended mare bellowed, seething with rage. "As if it isn't obvious!" The Manhattan mare raised the volume of her shrill, snobby voice to be heard over the din of the other patrons. "She is not fit to dine here with us. She has no horn to show off to make other ponies jealous." Twilight rose from her chair. "Do you have a problem with my date? Because if you have a problem with her, that means you have a problem with me." She maintained straight, unwavering eye contact directly into the center of the Manhattanite mare's pupils. The unicorn released a long, dramatic, snobbish gasp, nearly fainting from revulsion. She placed her hoof over her forehead dramatically. "Oh, the ponanity! This is beyond the pale, do you hear me? This truly is a nightmare of unimaginative proportions. You're dating that split tip?" Twilight stamped one hoof on the ground. "Enough!" She unfurled and spread her extensive alicorn wings to elucidate who, exactly, the mare was dealing with. She wasn't any other pony who would cower or shy away from being ranted at. She was the Princess of Friendship, some pony who did not take kindly to her loved ones being called racial pejoratives. The intimidation worked like a charm. Immediately, the Manhattanite mare blanched and retreated a little, her eyes widening. Twilight hovered several feet off of the ground. The flaps of her wings produced downdrafts of immense force, blowing leaves in all directions. "Who gave you the right to waltz in here and start verbally abusing my date with your stupid high-horse attitude?" Twilight snarled. The Manhattanite mare narrowed her eyes and doubled down, digging her hole ever deeper. "So that's your date, is she? I'd mistaken her for a dingy old doormat." Twilight interrupted by doing something she, admittedly, had little practice doing before. She summoned will from deep within the depths of her spirit, and assumed the royal Canterlot voice, as she had observed Celestia and Luna do before her time. "Silence!" The magic emitting from her horn flared, casting furious sparks of violet mana as she stomped towards the mayor's table. "Listen here, you shrieking, repulsive, vomitous little mass. Tempest was pardoned by Celestia because she proved herself in the end, when it mattered the most. She's rehabilitated. I'm shocked that you think it's appropriate to say these horrible slurs. Says a lot about Manhattan's so-called polite society." Twilight slammed both of her hooves on the mayor's table. She glared down the muzzle of the Manhattanite with an intensity that rivaled Fluttershy's stare. Twilight growled like a feral dog, arching her upper back in an attempt to look larger and more intimidating. "If you don't back off, I swear I will send you hurtling into the next moon in the next 5 seconds. A moment of stunned silence followed Twilight's outburst. The Manhattanite mare found herself speechless in the face of the furious alicorn, and only managed to squeak quietly. A rapid clip-clop of hooves sounded from the back door as Cardamom exited onto the patio. "What's going on?" Cardamom started to say, but as soon as she saw the mare Twilight was glowering at, her voice suddenly filled with ire. "You? How did you get back in here, Fusspot?" Fusspot attempted to summon forth the obnoxious, so-called bravery she had utilized earlier. "Stay out of this, you blue-collar immigrant—" Cardamom cut her off before she could finish her newest hate screed. "You and your foals were removed from our restaurant an hour ago for berating me and other members of our staff. Are you really going to force me to kick you out again?" The waitress looked at Twilight. "She wasn't giving you trouble too, was she?" "Oh," she replied. "You know, nothing serious or anything. Just average run-of-the-mill commentary about my date being a dud." She punctuated her verbal air quotes with a roll of her eyes. "What?" Cardamom's eyes narrowed furiously. Fusspot protested desperately, attempting to excuse herself. "I was just saying the truth." "Not in our town," Cardamom forcefully interrupted. "The Sunflower Grill has a policy for absolutely no toleration of despicable behavior like yours. You have precisely 60 seconds to get out of my establishment before I get the sheriff." "1, 2, the waitress continued. All around, the other patrons of the restaurant eagerly awaited to see what would happen next. Fusspot trembled anxiously, clearly debating her next move. 3. With an ugly scowl, Fusspot quickly grabbed her purse and dashed out of the restaurant like her flank was on fire. Along the way, she made sure to intentionally bump into other patrons along her path. The other diners cheered at the eviction of the loud-mouthed racist from their midst. A couple of ponies whistled in celebration. Twilight sighed with relief as, with the offender removed from the premises, she could resume her date. She returned to the table and sat. "Sorry about that, Tempest. At least that racist old hag is gone now. I guess money can't buy class, can it?" She chuckled. "Anyway, where were we?" She looked across the table to see Tempest, and saw that her aquamarine eyes were glazed over, as she vacantly stared at an indistinct point in the background, seemingly staring through Twilight rather than at her. All of the pensive and joyous emotion Twilight had seen in her eyes was gone, replaced with emptiness and self-loathing. "Tempest?" she asked softly, hoping to capture her attention and shatter her trance. A chill ran down Twilight's spine, as she realized something was very, very wrong with her date. "Tempest? Are you okay?" Tempest was not okay. The words of the Manhattanite mare were lodged in her brain, echoing repeatedly like a shout in a chasm. "Who allowed you to dine here? Cripple, dud, doormat, split tip." The words tumbled through her mind, ripping and tearing away at her nerves like rolling boulders made of razor blades. She breathed heavily. She recalled the words she'd called herself at Rarity's once again. Cripple, broken mare, outcast. I need to go." Tempest abruptly rose from her seat and walked off. "What? Wait!" Twilight yelped, trying to reach out and take her hoof. "Where are you going?" "I'm just going to the bathroom, Twilight. I'll be back soon." With that, Twilight was left sitting alone at their table with a confused and worried look on her face. Tempest briskly cantered back inside the building, trying to restrain impending tears. Too afraid to ask. Twilight finished her meal while she anxiously waited for Tempest to return. The soft jazz music soothed her nerves a bit, and she managed to convince herself Tempest might have just really needed to use the bathroom. No need to panic. Tempest would be back in a couple of minutes. But as the couple of minutes stretched to 10, then 20, then half an hour, the sensation of worry churning in Twilight's gut started to overtake her other thoughts. Tempest, where are you? She thought to herself. You're not sick, are you? A couple more minutes passed. The haze of unease settled around her. It was painful. I should just go check on her. Twilight rose from her seat and re-entered the restaurant, scanning the tables or booths to see if Tempest had sat down somewhere else. Unfortunately, she didn't spot her date anywhere. She noticed Cardamom walking through the aisle after delivering another tray of food to a nearby table. Thinking quickly, Twilight waved the waitress down. Hey, Cardamom? She asked, her voice carrying an obvious tone of worry. Have you seen Tempest anywhere? She ran off after that Mayor Fusspot's, tirade. Cardamom shrugged, apologetically. I'm sorry, Twilight, but I'm not sure. I thought I saw her head into the restroom a little bit ago, though. She did say that's where she was going, Twilight admitted. I'll check there. Where is it? The waitress nodded and pointed a hoof in the direction of a hallway off to one side of the building. It's right by the indoor street lamp, underneath the moon and sun signs. You can't miss it. Twilight thanked Cardamom and followed her instructions to track down her date. The worry in the pit of her stomach continued to build, a deep, aching sensation. Her instincts cautioned her Tempest was close by, and probably in a great deal of pain. When arriving at the entrance to the restrooms, Twilight navigated to the crescent-marked door of the mayor's room and pushed it inwards, entering. Rather than the standard, boring, utilitarian white tile affair, the bathroom's walls displayed a vibrant mural of a blue sky above Ponyville, showcasing clouds and picturesque cloud houses, and occasionally illustrating a small Pegasus flying between them. The sinks consisted of a basin of white sandstone set within the frame of a barrel, and furnished with shiny brass faucets, all lined up below a long, wide mirror. Twilight noticed one of the faucets close to the opposite wall of the bathroom had been left running, the dull hissing of the water somewhat muffling the music playing over the speakers. She stepped hesitantly towards the stalls. Tempest? No response. Tempest, are you in here? Twilight called again, her voice filled with worry. Tempest? Just barely audible over the music and running water was the faint sound of crying coming from the last stall. Twilight's gut knotted with worry. She approached the last stall and knocked gently on the door. Tempest? Go away, came Tempest's choked-up voice from within. Twilight felt a pang of heartache shoot through her barrel. The situation was clearly far worse than she had thought. Not wanting to intrude on Tempest's privacy, she asked, Can I come in? She made a noise in response that signaled I don't really care. Taking this as a yes, Twilight gently pushed open the wooden stall door, hearing the hinges creak loudly. Tempest? It was worse than she'd imagined. Tempest was in rough shape. She was huddled in one corner of the stall, curled up like a foal hiding from a monster. Tears smeared her makeup and caused it to streak, leaving little rivulets of magenta eyeshadow running down her muzzle and jaw. As she saw the door open, she quickly ran a hoof under her nose, wiping away snot expended from what had clearly been an intense crying session. Oh no, Twilight breathed, covering her mouth with one hoof in shock. Tempest, are you okay? What do you think, Twilight? She sniffled with a frustrated tone. Do I look like I'm okay? Tears welled in her eyes and she sobbed quietly, curling her forelegs around herself and holding them tightly. Oh, Tempest, Twilight whispered, her voice laden with sympathy and concern. She gingerly offered a hoof to her date, hoping she could provide some manner of comfort. Tempest reluctantly accepted the hoof, still weeping softly. Her knees wobbled as she stood unsteadily. With the gentleness of a summer breeze, Twilight guided her to the sinks. Tempest, I'm so sorry you were subjected to that abuse, Twilight told her softly. I was just as offended and upset as you were, and, well, you saw. I told her off. She ran off at the threat of being escorted out. She won't be bothering you anymore, I promise. As her date continued to cry and rest her head on the bathroom countertop, Twilight cut to the chase. You know, you've been acting really, really strange all day, ever since I bumped into you near your apartment. You were jittery and nervous for, the first half of our date, not to mention when you invited me to this whole affair. It was like even being around me was enough to terrify you. And don't think I didn't notice the look in your eyes. It looked like you wanted to shrivel up and wilt away at the table. I'm worried about you. Please, Tempest, what's going on? Through a series of soft whimpers, Tempest managed, He was right. Twilight blinked. Come again? He was right about me. I don't... A gush of tears escaped Tempest's aquamarine eyes, and she let out another soft whine. Who? Who was right about... The Storm King! Tempest suddenly shouted. He was right about everything with me. I really am a dud. Twilight took a step back, partially due to surprise by Tempest's use of the D word, and partially from the volume at which it was said. Her mouth hung open and she blinked in stunned silence. What? She asked, a tremor in her voice. The Storm King always told me no one would ever love me because of the things I did for him. He called me broken, and a cripple, and a monster. He said I was worthless without him, that he gave me purpose. He said he was the only one who would ever care about me, who would ever see me as his friend, because he needed me, and I needed him to get my horn back. And then when I showed up here in Equestria and powered up that damn staff, he double-crossed me and turned everything I'd been led to believe for the past 10 years on its head. And the worst part? He bucking smiled while saying it. Tempest slammed both of her hooves onto the countertop. So yeah. Tempest's voice quavered as she poured her soul into the speech. I've been dealing with this for over a year with Dr. Blossom. I hear those words that bigoted horse used every night in my nightmares. But it gets worse. You want to know why? Because I knew it was true all this time. No pony has ever been there for me to tell everything the Storm King said was a lie. No pony has ever been there for me, the real me. And as soon as I'm finally on a date with some pony I've dreamed about, my past keeps coming back to haunt me with a vengeance. Twilight stammered and stuttered. What? Tempest, what are you saying? She rapidly swung her head to face Twilight, tears leaking from her eyes as her voice swelled to a cry. I came here tonight to spend time with you because I'm in love with you, Twilight Sparkle, but then I remembered how pathetic I am. Tempest crumpled into a sad, little, trembling mass, sobbing loudly like a little filly, causing her makeup to wash away in the process. She covered her face with both hooves, trying to hide the ordeal from Twilight. Twilight struggled to form words. Her mouth hung open in an abject dumbfoundedness, her eyes wide with an emotion she couldn't possibly begin to describe. But there was one aspect of the whirlpool of emotions swirling in her heart that Twilight valued deeply. It was empathy. And she knew that if any pony were ever to need it most, Tempest would be that pony. As tears continued to leak from her eyes, Tempest slowly sat upright. Seeing her reflection above the sink with her ruined makeup, she cringed in disgust as she thought, Best date ever, my fuzzy Her self-loathing, however, was quickly interrupted by the embrace of supremely soft, feathery wings and a pair of lilac forelegs wrapping around her. Twilight hugged her, not in a quick, casual, good-to-see-you kind of way, but a hug, in a tender, loving, romantic way. The way a lost, distraught pony would hug their loved one upon their reunion, with a palpable current of affection, emotion, and desire. And it felt better than anything Tempest had ever felt in her life. She hesitantly wrapped her own forelegs around Twilight, clinging to her like a buoy in a hurricane. Twilight rocked her gently from side to side, the way a mother would rock a fussing foal to encourage them to settle. Tempest didn't know how long she remained in the embrace, but she didn't care if it was 30 seconds or 3 hours. It was the most incredible feeling she'd ever felt. Twilight withdrew from the hug to gaze at her date with an adoring, loving look. As Tempest maintained eye contact, she could practically feel the warmth and joy flooding back into her aquamarine eyes. She blushed and looked away for a couple seconds. Tempest, Twilight cooed, gently running one of her hooves across her date's jaw and under her chin. Look at me. Tempest felt the touch of the gentle hoof on her jaw and had to suppress the urge to melt. She looked up and met Twilight's gaze again, feeling every dark thought, every sour mood, every bad feeling wash away like water off of a duck's slick back. I want to make sure you understand a couple of things, the Alicorn said with a soft but serious tone. Number 1, whatever the Storm King said to you was bullshit. He said those horrible things to try to break your spirit, so you would become dependent on him. A tactic for abusers. I've had to deal with a few in my day, and it makes me sick to see someone warp the concept of friendship that way. It's an addiction, and it always leads to destruction. I know you. Practically everyone in Ponyville knows you. You are beautiful and wonderful, and most importantly, you are inspiring. You're selfless and brave and intelligent and sweet and caring, and you have excellent taste in food. If the town is ever threatened by anything at all, be it a monster, or a natural disaster, or one of Trixie's magic tricks gone awry, or, knowing Trixie all three at once, you'd be the first to jump into action to help ponies in danger. You may have a handicap, Tempest, but you are still one of the most powerful ponies I've ever met. I've never seen any unicorn use their horn quite the way you do. I see you out there chatting with other ponies, and it makes me absurdly proud. None of that could be done by someone who was worthless. Tempest felt herself choking up again, but, unlike before, due to tenderness. Number 2, Twilight continued, whoever told you you were ugly was dead wrong, because Tempest, you are gorgeous. She gently brushed away her date's ruined eyeshadow. Just a glance from you makes my heart feel like it's going to burst out of my chest and start dancing like a lunatic. Twilight ran one of her hooves through Tempest's soft and silky mane, gently parting her hair. Tempest froze and shivered with delight at her date's touch. Across Tempest's beautiful and velvety fur her hoof traveled, slowly, tantalizingly across her foreleg and the rolling shapes of muscles below the skin. Twilight's breath hitched. Your husky voice shakes my soul. Your smile makes me want to fly through the biggest, fluffiest clouds I can find. I already explained how I feel about your dress earlier, but that's nothing compared to how I really feel for you. You're so muscular and strong and sexy. Smoking, sizzling hot, even. How could any pony ever convince you otherwise? Twilight took Tempest's hoof again, holding it tightly and firmly and tenderly. Whenever I see you, my mind is flooded by how much I want to hold you, and be close to you, and... Twilight's face was invaded by a pervasive blush. And tell you how much I love you. Tempest gasped and her eyes widened upon hearing the last part of Twilight's confession. Twilight looked directly into Tempest's eyes, communicating clearly the sincerity of her feelings. And number 3, she slowly said, her heart racing and her head feeling light. Tempest, I feel exactly the same way about you as you do about me. I'm head over horseshoes for you. I'm over the moon. She chuckled. I'm running out of phrases, and you know that never happens to me. And finally, Twilight dared to take a leap of faith. She leaned forward and kissed Tempest square on the lips. It was short and brief, but it communicated more than words ever could. Afterwards, she withdrew her head and gazed fondly into Tempest's eyes, with a gaze full of pure, unconditional love. The moment Twilight's lips met hers, a lightning bolt of adrenaline and desire raced through Tempest's nervous system, from the tips of her hooves to the crown of her head. Her heartbeat accelerated, and her breath released shallow and ragged. She gasped softly, then placed both of her hooves around Twilight's face and drew her in for another kiss. A more eager, more passionate, more amorous kiss. Though rough and sloppy due to a lack of experience, it was the purest manner of showing affection she could possibly share. She heard Twilight initially yelp in surprise, but then moan into the kiss as she closed her eyes. Tempest's eyelids fluttered shut as her mind burst with explosions of desire. The patterns she witnessed were brighter and more vibrant than anything she'd ever seen or dreamed of in her entire life. Not even the most potent chocolate flavor or the purest taste of cinnamon could produce patterns of light on the scale of the kaleidoscope of pleasure and joy and love she experienced behind her eyelids. Twilight released another soft moan as she felt Tempest's tongue enter her mouth, and she instinctively pushed her own tongue in the direction the foreign invader came from. The rush of dopamine from the kiss served to melt Twilight's heart faster with the intense heat of passion, like a crucible purifying gold. She decided to make a bold move, and very gently nibble on Tempest's lips. The unicorn reciprocated, though hesitantly, clearly copying Twilight's moves. If a kiss could last forever, there is no pony in the world I would want it to be with aside from you. As their tempestuous display of passion concluded, they separated, blushing profusely and staring at each other in stunned silence. Oh my gosh, I didn't know I had that in me. Twilight breathed, almost embarrassed. I didn't know I did either, Tempest squeaked, and hugged the alicorn tightly, giggling sweetly into her chest fluff. Twilight reciprocated the embrace, nuzzling Tempest's barrel with her nose. The two ponies remained glued together, sharing warmth and affection like birds cuddling in winter. But once their moment inevitably concluded, Twilight leaned back and told Tempest, Boy, am I glad you agreed to that second date after all. The filly friend of the Princess of Friendship deserves a lot of attention. Twilight, you have no idea how badly I've wanted you to ask me to be your filly friend. Not in my wildest dreams did I ever think you would. But you did. She sniffled a little, nuzzling the alicorn's muzzle. Tempest Shadow, Fizzle Pop Berry Twist, it would be the highest honor to have a mare like you, Twilight whispered. My Tempest, my Fizzle Pop, my Fizzy. Fizzy? Tempest snickered. Exactly, Twilight beamed. It's cute and sweet, like you. Tempest laughed, her ribs rising and falling with each chuckle as it rattled forth from her lungs. It was the first genuine laugh she had experienced in a long time. Cute and sweet, huh? The cutest and sweetest mare in all of Equestria. All right, Tempest submitted. I'll let you call me Fizzy, but only if I get to call you something in return. How about Sparks? Twilight snorted in laughter. Philly, you got yourself a deal. A voice piped up from the other end of the bathroom, interrupting their intimate conversation. Ladies. Tempest and Twilight turned to see Cardamom before the entrance to the stall, shifting on her hooves slightly. I'm sorry, I really hate to break up such a romantic moment, she hurriedly said, but I really need to pee. Could you please? They exchanged a glance with each other, then politely nodded and moved out of the waitress's way. After Cardamom hurriedly slipped inside the stall, Tempest and Twilight trotted out of the bathroom and returned to the back hallway. As Twilight turned to face her smiling filly friend, she saw the gorgeous unicorn standing in the warm yellow light of the decorative street lamp. The way the sequins on her dress sparkled took Twilight's breath away yet again. So, what do you want to do now? The night's still young. I've still got enough bits to pay for dessert. Tempest's eyes lit up at the prospect of dessert. Dessert sounds great, Twilight, she said excitedly. What do you have in mind? Twilight winked and whispered, Perhaps, if you remember your dad's recipe, we can custom order a berry twist. Twilight had to practically hold her filly friend back from running at full gallop through the restaurant, back to their table. And that is how you deal with a fussy alicorn foal on a very busy day. Tempest laughed as her filly friend finished the story she was telling, one involving her niece, Flurryheart, causing all sorts of chaos on a day with an overbooked schedule. Also that Prince Shining Armor and Princess Cadence could go to an art gallery for a few hours. That sounds like one hell of a day, she said, as she trotted along in her dress on the way back to Twilight's castle. Bet it felt good to go back home and sleep, huh? You have no idea, Twilight replied. Don't get me wrong, I love my little niece Flurry, but she can be quite a hoofful. Sounds like somebody else I know. Tempest nudged the princess with her hip affectionately, eliciting more laughter from her as they strode to the castle's front door. I suppose it's my family curse, Twilight snickered, slowing to a stop. But it's one we in Clan Sparkle carry with strength and pride, charming in its own right. Tempest hummed happily as she drew alongside Twilight, and nuzzled her neck, singing, I can't wait to meet your family. This gave Twilight pause, as she realized the level of commitment Tempest had agreed to. Oh my gosh, she said quietly, a nervous tone in her voice. Now that we're dating, you're going to have to meet my parents and my brother and sister-in-law and... oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. What are they going to say? Will they support us? I know they supported Shiny when he started dating Cadence, but that was because we'd known her for years. What if they don't approve? What if they start asking questions like, Hey, Tempest interrupted, placing a hoof on Twilight's shoulder. Relax, Sparks. We'll answer those questions in time. At least, I hope we will. Twilight's worries faded away at the instant of her filly friend's touch. She looked into Tempest's eyes again and found within reassuring warmth and adoration where self-loathing had previously reigned unchallenged. Her eyes grew misty and she beamed. Yeah, she said, a more confident tone in her voice. We will. The two ponies admired each other as if they were the only two in the world. The perfection of the moment could not be understated. The affection Twilight felt for Tempest, and what she, in return, felt for Twilight, was pure, unconditional love. You know, Twilight stated softly, you didn't have to go to all the trouble of arranging a date just to tell me how you felt. You could have just intercepted me at my office at the school, or in my castle any time, and you would have easily gotten the same result as you did tonight, you becoming my filly friend. Tempest shrugged. I'd never had time to date before, so I wanted to feel what it was like. She smiled shyly. You managed to fluster me just by speaking to me. I didn't say anything earlier than tonight because I was just too afraid to ask. Aw, Twilight crooned for her filly friend. Tempest, you never have to be too afraid to ask me anything ever again. Because, barring some sort of potentially world-ending catastrophe needing me and my friends to stop, I will always accept your offer. She leaned over and kissed Tempest again, a quick peck on the cheek. The unicorn giggled at the gesture. I love you, Fizzy, Twilight said with pride. I love you too, my princess. Tempest reciprocated the peck on the cheek, hearing her softly gasp in joy. So, Twilight said, 1 o'clock on the nature trail outside of Sweet Apple Acres this Friday? Tempest nodded to confirm. I'll be waiting for you there for a nice, long walk. Just make sure you remember to bring water and a snack or two. I will, don't worry, the princess promised. You want me to bring a picnic lunch or something? Do you even need to ask, Twilight? Twilight laughed as she headed up the stairs to her castle. See you then. Have a good night. You too, Tempest called in response, before cantering away across town towards her apartment, practically clicking her back hooves and whooping and jumping in joy as she ran through town. If she knew how and wasn't in a dress, she likely would have cartwheeled. For once, she didn't pause to consider if she had an audience and what was appropriate. Her ecstasy far outweighed her doubts. Inside the Castle of Friendship, Twilight closed the large doors behind herself and released her ponytail. She did a little victory prance as soon as she re-entered, letting out a woohoo to no one in particular, before sighing giddily. She heard nearby footsteps and noticed Spike to be awake still, wearing a robe and stirring sugar into a mug of tea. So, he said with a smug smirk upon seeing Twilight's elation, how'd the date go? Well, Twilight said slyly, I met a really polite waitress, a stuffy loudmouth bigot attempted to ruin the atmosphere for everyone, and, well, I officially have a filly friend! Spike practically dropped his teacup in shock. No way! Already? Awesome! He took flight and began to beatbox while Twilight danced around the great hall like a rabbit in spring. The little dragon wrapped his arms around Twilight in a tight hug, and she was more than happy to reciprocate the kind gesture. I can't believe it, Spike marveled. So, does that mean we'll be seeing Tempest more often? I've been wanting to. Oh yes, I can guarantee we will, Spike. There are so many things she hasn't tried yet. So many places she hasn't seen or been to. So many dates I can take her on. It's almost overwhelming. Spike hugged her once more. Good for you, Twilight. Good for you. After heading upstairs and making the necessary preparations for sleep, Twilight bid goodnight to her draconic little brother, and slipped under the covers. She wriggled beneath the sheets until she was comfortable, then fell into a deep, comfortable sleep. Her sweet, delectable dreams were about only one pony. Grubber was busy wiping down the counter in the kitchen of the apartment when he heard the door open. He'd already started a fire in the fireplace to warm Tempest when she returned from the date, and had also taken the liberty of removing the chocolate fudge cake Pinkie Pie had dropped off earlier that day from the fridge, just in case the date didn't go to plan. In truth, when he saw the dazed unicorn walk through the door, he was ready to break out the comfort food and fuzzy blankets to help her recover. But then he noticed something odd about Tempest's demeanor. She didn't appear to be in a depressed or angry state, nor much of anything between. Instead, she turned and looked at him wordlessly. Did the date go well, Tempest? He asked hesitantly. Everything good? Food was good? Music was good? Twilight liked everything? Tempest slowly turned away from him and retreated to the couch, where she typically slept, not bothering to take off her dress. Not a good sign. Grubber hurriedly drew alongside the purple unicorn as she flopped onto the couch on her belly, ready to help in whatever way he could. Tempest, he said quietly, his sympathy surging forth. I'm so sorry that it didn't. And then Tempest did something very out of character. She grabbed a pillow, hugged it to her body, and released the loudest squee that Grubber had ever heard, laughing and squealing and giggling, celebrating like a maniac, rolling around on the couch like a content pig wallowing in mud. Her entire face turned scarlet from sheer excitement, and she buried her face in the pillow to muffle another ear-splitting shriek of joy. She loves me, 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 she loves me! She really, really loves me! It was all Tempest could muster during the celebration, like a little filly during Heartswarming Eve, who received the exact gift she wanted. Grubber breathed an enormous sigh of relief, grateful he didn't need to act as emotional support hedgehog for the rest of the night. I told you so. Like I said, Tempest, you just have to not focus on what-ifs. What is, Tempest squealed in complete ecstasy, is that she's my filly friend. At that moment, it seemed Tempest Shadow truly was the happiest mare in all of Equestria. Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed the reading. Until next time, stay tuned.